Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Yamazakura in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 1, Prologue. Zero Suki Uchiha wakes to the sound of screaming cicadas with tear tracks on her face. Neither is anything she's not used to. Suki struggles out of her bedroll and takes a broad look around the tent. In its wide expanse there's only her and her nurse, Hatsu, sleeping on her left side with her back to the front flaps. Suki hears that the daughters of daimyo can sneak away from their sleeping nurses in the middle of the night and slip out of their estates to go have all sorts of adventures. She knows the second she moves out of her bedroll Hatsu will be on her feet, kunao in hand and sherry non-spinning. Suki just shakes her awake. Hatsu blinks, bleary-eyed, and yawns. Young mistress, what is it? You should be sleeping. One of the first lessons Suki learned in her 7 years was how to speak when all she wants is to sob. I would like to go see my father, please. Hatsu opens her mouth to give her the usual speech, that her father is a very busy man and whatever it is can wait until morning, but her gaze hangs on Suki's quivering lip and the words catch in her throat. Instead, she sighs, very well then, young mistress. Hold just a moment. Hatsu extricates herself from her bedroll and ambles over to the front flap. She lifts it and pokes her head outside, speaking a few hushed whispers before drawing back and ushering Suki over. Hatsu parts the tent flaps for Suki to stumble through. Her uncle Izuna is waiting just outside, as he always does. No man of the Uchiha clan is ever assigned to guard his own wife and children. Izuna smiles and asks, would you like me to carry you, Suki? Suki finds it in herself to pout, I am too old for that, uncle. Izuna laughs and offers his hand, I see. Do forgive my impertinence then, Lady Uchiha. Come, allow me to avenge this slight by guiding you to your father. Suki hides a hiccuping giggle behind her sleeve and gives Izuna her other hand. He dips low in a courtly bow before leading her towards the heart of the Uchiha compound. Suki has been told that once upon a time the Uchiha compound had been a fortress at the top of a mountain, given life by the spring that birthed the Naka River. The walls had been glittering white, the roof tiles deep blue, and the clan crest painted in brilliant red wherever there was room. The forest had hidden them and the mountain had protected them. War had been far away, there. Suki cannot imagine that life. She was born in a forward operating camp. All she has ever known is a life in constant motion, their caravan making pilgrimage from battle to battle in the Naka River Valley. In 7 years she's lived in thrice as many places, leaving by day to find the next battle or by night with enemies dogging their steps. They say in 7 more years she will marry a daimyo's son to secure a contract, or a clan head's son to secure an alliance. Suki thinks she would prefer the daimyo's son. Perhaps living within his estate will bring her closer to what their home on the mountain might have been like. To eyes without sherry non, all the Uchiha tents look the same. Now that Suki has awoken hers, she can see what makes her father's grander than the rest. In iridescent red a dragon twists and whirls along the heavy canvas, scales glittering in the torchlight. Izuna catches her gawking from the corner of his eye. He smiles, but the expression is dulled by a wash of sorrow. Many Uchiha smiles are. Izuna lifts the tent's front flap and chuckles, Venerable Lord Uchiha, I come to you as escort for one of our clansmen. She has come with an urgent petition that must be heard at once. Her father, lit by low candlelight, looks up from the maps splayed out in front of him. With firelight playing through his long dark hair and a stern frown darkening his features, for a moment Suki sees only Lord Madara Uchiha, dragon of the south and one of the most fearsome shinobi alive. Suki cannot keep from sucking a sharp breath in through her teeth. His eyes, keen as a falcon's, dart to the sound and pick her out of the darkness. The tension drains from his shoulders and his frown washes away, replaced by the barest shadow of a smile. In the time it takes for a hummingbird to flap its wings he is her father again. He nods to Izuna, thank you. You are dismissed. Izuna bows low and takes his leave. There is a brief pause where father and daughter stare at each other across a map of the river valley, neither sure who ought to speak first. Her father makes the first move and wordlessly pats the cushion at his side. Suki forgets that she is a daughter of the Uchiha, the daughter of a ninja, and scrambles ungracefully around to throw herself against her father's side and bury her face in his robes. Her father's arm comes around to tuck her in closer, sheltering her like a hen hides her chicks beneath her feathers. He murmurs, voice rich and dark like the night sky, which raid did you dream of? Her voice is thick and high and reedy as she chokes out, T the last the one wh when M mother. Suki's words are torn to pieces by sharp sobs that make her whole body convulse. She remembers her mother in all her shades. She remembers mother in bright sunlight, gathering flowers and braiding them into her hair, tucking one behind father's ear and winning a warm smile and a kiss to her temple in return. She remembers mother's eyes burning with the sherry non as she grabs an assassin by the collar, forces him to the ground, and thrusts a single senbon into his neck to kill him quickly and painlessly. She remembers mother through a hole in the physician's tent, sagging against father, whispering, I can't do it again, Madara, I can't lose another baby, not like this or on the battlefield or, and father drawing her closer as he murmurs, so you won't, my love. We did what we could. No more. She remembers what the inside of mother's chest looked like as the white-haired Senju in blue armor carved her open with a blade of water, the blood black like oil in the light from the burning tents. The Senju had turned his gaze toward Suki, but mother's last act in this world had been to spit blood directly into his eye, making him flinch right into a bevy of shuriken from Izuna. She remembers her mother's corpse growing more and more distant as Izuna threw her over his shoulder and carried her away, remembers her corpse waiting every time she closed her eyes, every time she slept. Her father's hand cards through her hair, his voice bringing her home to the present, you miss her. Suki gasps, I don't know what do I do without her? Suki looks up to see her father's eyes staring off, past the tent, past the river valley, past everything. I've been wondering that myself. I don't know if that's a question that actually has an answer. For now, we do as we have always done. We do unto the Senju as they have done unto us. Suki nuzzles closer to her father, eyes resting on the map without reading it. No matter how many times they do unto the Senju as the Senju have done to them, it never seems to break through their armor and pierce the soft underbelly. They lay waste to the Senju on the battlefield, steal their clients, raise their camps, and they always come back to cut down yet more brothers and mothers and friends, never satisfied with the pain they've already caused. Suki grasps a tight handful of her father's haori and murmurs, do the Senju hate us because we're cursed? Her father had been drafting some sort of missive with his other hand, but it immediately stills and he fixes her with a startled look, cursed. Suki shrinks away from her father's gaze, they. I've heard small folk say we're cursed. That we have a curse of hatred, where our love turns to hate when we lose the people we care for, and we lose ourselves trying to prove that we're better, and. Not a word of that is true. Suki's eyes leap back to her father's face. His gaze is hard, but not cruel. He looks as he does when he gives speeches to inspire the men, when he barters with daimyo who will easily cave at the sight of sherry non, when he rides off to a battle he knows he can win. He continues, there is no curse upon our blood. The curse of hatred is a vile piece of slander the Senju spit about us to any who will listen. They're blind to their own faults, to the blood they've shed in the name of revenge. They would rather paint us as monsters than admit to being anything less than wise sages who are above such base things as caring when those they love are slain. Each of them, to a man, hypocrites. Her meets her eyes, you have heard of the curse of hatred. Have you also heard of their will of fire? Suki nods, grip tightening on her father's robes. All the small folk are abuzz about the will of fire, obsessed with the Senju's pretty dream. She hears it being whispered around every street corner, this utopia where every man forgets clan and family and acts as just one root holding up a tree so large it breaches the clouds. It's inescapable. Father strokes her hair and his voice drifts into the tone he uses when telling her a story. My grandfather fought the head of the Senju clan when they were young men. He chased him through the clan compound and all the way to his home. As the clan head's defeat drew nearer, grandfather sent him tearing through the wall of his tent, and when he followed, he saw the man's wife and infant son huddled in a corner. He thought of his own wife, miles away. He thought of my father, still so young. He offered the head of the Senju clan a simple set of terms: leave, and the Uchiha clan would not follow. Leave, and he could see his son grow up. Father's hand stills on the top of her head. He shuts his eyes. He takes a deep breath, in through his nose, out through his mouth. Suki waits. His voice is brimming with sorrow and shaking with rage as he continues, his wife threw a kunao into her husband's throat. She drew another and drove it into the heart of her wailing son. My grandfather asked her why. She had answered, better he die for the clan than live for us. The Senju came upon the scene and did not see my grandfather. They saw their clan's leader and his heir martyred, his wife mad with grief. The Senju were galvanized by her pretty lie instead of shaken by the truth. They brought their whole clan down upon our compound and cut us down by half. Tears run down Suki's face as she imagines the poor baby, screaming his little throat raw. He must have been so frightened. He must have been clinging so tight to his mother's breast, secure in the knowledge that at least this was safe. At least she would protect him. What could he have thought as the knife came down? Could he have thought anything at all? Father draws her onto his lap and holds her close. He presses his lips into her hair. She buries her face into his chest and inhales the scent of smoke. Father's love is warm and steady, like a heavy quilt in winter. She feels the rumble of his deep voice as he murmurs, the Senju speak of fire, but they only see its light, its warmth. They don't touch it, shape it, breathe it as we do. The only will fire has is the will to consume whatever it touches. Senju throw their lives away, abandon those they are to protect, throw any body able or not onto the front lines, recklessly sacrificing pieces to save the whole. The will of fire asks you to set yourself aflame to keep others warm. Suki would hold on to those words, even after the alliance, the founding of the village, her father's defection, and her clan's disavowal of him in favor of licking Hashirama's boots. She would spit them at her husband through grit teeth when he would return from meetings of the clans with his tail between his legs, having conceded yet more to the Senju. She would whisper them to Fugaku when he was small and still needed to cry away the nightmares on her lap. She would mutter them to Fugaku again when he was not quite small, not quite tall, and it fell to her to teach him what it truly took to be the head of the Uchiha clan. She would state them solidly and without flinching when Fugaku was a grown man and expressed doubts about the coup d'état. She would spin them to little Ataki and Suzuki as she told them stories from a time not as long ago as they would like to hope, when the tailed beasts roamed free and all was anarchy. And they would be the last words that passed through her mind as Ataka came for her on that blood-soaked night, tears streaking down his face as the will of fire burned him alive. Chapter 2, I. In the pre-dawn light, the world is a pale blue-gray. Fog rolls down the mountains and spreads out across the vast open wetlands of the land of sound. It settles thick over the rice paddies, and if any were awake, none of the farmers would see the long slender leaves shifting ever so slightly as a shadow slaloms through their crops. The shadow creeps west, moving until he hits the edge of the paddy, where it butts up against a copse of oak trees. He climbs out of the paddy, shaking the water off the hem of his dark cloak. He pauses. Sai observes the trees through his tiger mask. Not for the first time, he wonders how they got here. Perhaps a grave marker for a Senju, commemorating a battle that took them this far north? Or perhaps they just grew here naturally. After all, oak trees aren't unheard of in sound. It's the simpler explanation, so it's likely correct. He sighs beneath his mask. Return to the task at hand. There is no room for curiosity. Sai falls back into his rhythm. He stays low as he inches deeper into the trees, eyes crawling across the uneven ground for his target. The asset is good about rotating her drop points, but she falls into her patterns, the same as any leaf. If he's read her right, it should be nestled between two roots on the largest tree in the copse at its dead center. Sai keeps his breathing slow, his steps soft, his chakra contained. The civilians may be asleep, but this is the perfect time for ninja to be out. His caution proves prudent. Before Sai can come all the way around a tree's thick trunk, he catches sight of a form leaning against the largest tree in the copse. He immediately presses his body to the bark and, with a ram sign, uses the hiding in surface technique to sink into the tree. He slides up its trunk and into the canopy, breaching carefully so as to not disturb the branches. From his perch in the leaves, Sai observes the interloper. The round glasses sitting low on his nose are covered in a layer of condensation. His long silver hair has been braided and draped across his shoulders. Any identifying fatigues are hidden beneath a heavy cloak with a mantle that reaches down to his elbows, but Sai doesn't need that hint. He recognizes the face from the intel. Kabuto Yakushi is mere feet away from him. One of Kabuto's arms is crossed over his chest while the other tosses a round stone up in the air and catches it, over and over again. Sai resists the jolt that tries to run up his spine upon seeing the stone. Before he can formulate a strategy, Kabuto holds the stone up above his head. He taps the face of it with his thumb, chakra flowing into the rock and lighting up a seal. The seal breaks, releasing a hushed, feminine voice into the air. This is Sakura Harino reporting on March 1, 1002. All my assets are in position and all my preparations have been made. I'll be making my move in 10 days' time. If all goes well, I will have eliminated the target in 24 hours with no casualties and will be arriving back to headquarters in a week at most. If it doesn't, there's another stone, buried in the dirt below this one. It has a message for my mother, Tsubaki Harino. If you can, please bring it to her. If Danzo says you can't, then I understand. Signing off. Kabuto smirks, drawling, "See, that's why you never work with amateurs." Sai drops from the branches, landing a yard away from Kabuto. If Sakura's mission was your primary concern, I imagine you would be back at your base killing her right now. So it stands to reason I am your target. Kabuto chuckles, got it in one. And if I am your target, Sai continues, you discovered me long before I got close, and could have engaged me or trapped me then. So, then, your intention is... Kabuto's smirk stretches into a grin. Things have changed since my day, but I know you're still wired with a radio. Call your boss. Tell him Kabuto wants to make a deal. This past winter was a warm one, so even this early in the season the cherry blossoms are starting to open up, blanketing the leaf village in petals. From his vantage point atop this telephone pole, Naruto feels like he's looking at the village through fluffy pink clouds. If there's an ideal way to finally see his home again after 2 years away, Naruto's sure this is it. In a way, everything's changed. Sakura's favorite tea house is now an izakaya, the main drag is actually paved, the hospital has grown another wing, and Tsunade has joined her family and teacher on Hokage Rock. But there are still kids running through the street, laughing and smiling. There are still genin teams sitting on benches and enjoying a snack after some mind-numbing drink. There are still little convenience stores with cats lounging out front in the warm spring sunshine. People are still happy. So the Leaf Village hasn't changed at all. Naruto grins wide and stands to his full height, throwing his arms out wide as he calls out, "Look out, Leaf Village. Your future Hokage is back to take this town by storm, believe it." A few people look up in shock. Some more wave. Even more shoot dirty looks his way. Jiraiya shakes his head and crosses his arms over his chest with a fond chuckle. So many more people just keep on walking. Nothing Naruto didn't expect. This place really hasn't changed at all. Hey, dumbass. Naruto almost falls off the telephone pole. He spins toward the familiar voice and finds its source perched on the next roof over and, grinning at him. Naruto rubs his eyes. No, it's real. Sasuke Uchiha is smiling in a way that shows his teeth in public in broad daylight. He's gotten taller, swapped out his stupid high-collared shirt and shorts for a heavy canvas jacket and pants, and his headband now sits where his brace used to. His face has gotten more lean and chiseled in a way that almost makes Naruto think of Itaka before he pushes the thought away. He's still slightly favoring his left leg as he grins, at Naruto across the gap. Sasuke brings a hand up to cup around his mouth as he calls, "Long time no s." Naruto doesn't let him finish that sentence. He's leapt over to the roof and pulled him into the tightest bear hug he has in him before Sasuke can blink. Sasuke returns the squeeze twofold, the strength of his grip forcing a shocked wheeze out of Naruto's lungs. Sasuke breaks the embrace and pulls back to say, "No wonder Shizune insisted I take the rooftops for that errand. Did you just get back?" "Yeah, like 5 minutes ago," Naruto laughs. "It's been forever, dude. How are you? How's the village?" "Well, as you can see," Sasuke gestures with his arm to the surrounding buildings, "I managed not to burn the place down while you were gone. Good thing you didn't. If I got back here and couldn't get my Ichiraku fixed there'd be hell to pay." Naruto replies, "We're definitely getting lunch there, believe it." "Sure, but first I gotta drag you to the tower," Sasuke sighs. "You know how Tsunade will get if you put off reporting back." A voice, less high-pitched than he remembers, calls from the ground, "Hey. Naruto." Naruto and Sasuke peer over the side of the roof. Naruto recognizes Kano Amaru's long blue scarf a fraction of a second before he recognizes the kid himself. He hasn't changed as much in the face as Sasuke, but he's shot up at least half a foot and he's replaced Naruto's old goggles with a proper Leaf Village headband. His two friends are close by, also sporting headbands and bright grins. From the corner of his eye Naruto spies Jiraiya hanging back, eyeing the gaggle of genin with an arched brow and bemused smirk. Naruto grins wide and crows, "Hey guys," before leaping off the roof. He hears Sasuke roll his eyes before he follows him down, the two of them landing in front of the three kids. Naruto reaches out and ruffles Kano Amaru's hair. "Good to see you, Kano Amaru. So you made genin, huh? That's great. Are these guys your team now?" Kano Amaru flushes with pride, "You know it. I can't believe you're back. We've been on so many missions and I've got so many crazy new jutsu to show you. You've got time for one," Sasuke cuts in, the Hokage waiting on him. Kano Amaru shoots a quick glare over Naruto's shoulder at Sasuke before it falls into a pensive frown. He taps his chin with his index finger as he thinks. After a moment, his eyes light up and his mouth unfolds into a wicked grin. Kano Amaru runs through dog and bore as he exclaims, "Check this out." Se. Mogi's fist slams down on the top of Kano Amaru's head like he's a whack-a-mole. Kano Amaru chokes on his own spit and goes crashing to the ground before he can even think of forming Ram. Mogi glares down at Kano Amaru and snaps, "What is wrong with you? We're in public and Sasuke is here. If you embarrass me in front of Sasuke I swear I will strangle you with your own scarf." She turns to Sasuke and is all sweetness and light in blink of an eye. "I'm so sorry about him, Sasuke, I don't know where he gets these ideas from." As Mogi prattles on, Naruto crouches down next to Kano Amaru and whispers, "Yeah, pro tip on the sexy jutsu, don't do it in front of girls." Kano Amaru rubs the sore spot on the top of his head and mutters, "Got it, boss." Sasuke grabs Naruto by the elbow and drags him to his feet as he starts down the street. "Yeah, we're gonna get going now, come on Naruto." From the corner of his ear Naruto hears Mogi call, "Bye Sasuke. I'll see you around, that's a promise." Jiraiya falls in step with the two of them and snickers, "So you're still popular with the girls, huh Uchiha?" Naruto's shoulders slump as he groans, "Of course that didn't change. If you want a legion of preteen girls who fall in love with you after you heal one training injury following you around you can have them," Sasuke hisses through grit teeth. Naruto is ready to withhold any and all sympathy for Sasuke's plight. That's before they're waylaid on their way to the tower by a half-dozen more girls between the ages of 11 and 14 trying to flag down Sasuke. One even fakes a bad fall to get Sasuke's medical attention, but instead gets a scolding from her Jonin-sensei. All told, they make the straight shot down the main drag to the Hokage Tower take an extra 10 minutes. "I can't believe there are no girls your own age in your little gaggle of admirers," Jiraiya grouses as they spiral single file up the stairs to Tsunade's office. "That circus outside would be bearable if it got you even one date, but..." From his position between Sasuke and Jiraiya Naruto sees Sasuke's shoulders tighten and his grip on the handrail go white-knuckled. The metal crunches under his grip, and when he removes his hand that portion of the railing is a perfect mold for the inside of Sasuke's fist. Sasuke's voice comes out rough and dark, "I'm not interested in a date." Sasuke keeps going up the stairs but Naruto and Jiraiya hang back for a moment, watching his back recede. "Well," Jiraiya mutters, "guess that answers the "is he over Sakura yet?" question." Naruto tastes something sour on his tongue he can't identify and jugs to catch up with Sasuke. They fall back into small talk, expertly pretending that didn't just happen without needing to discuss it. They make it to Tsunade's office and Sasuke raps on the door with his knuckles. "Lady Tsunade, you have a..." Sasuke shoots Naruto an APPRizing glance before continuing, "mildly important visitor." Naruto elbows Sasuke in the ribs and Sasuke elbows him back as Tsunade calls from inside, "Bring him in." Naruto brings himself in, throwing the doors open and declaring, "Howdy there, Grandma. I'm back." Tsunade, Shizune, and Taunton aren't a surprise. They're exactly where he expected them to be and reacting how he thought they would. Shizune is beaming from ear to ear, Taunton is bouncing excitedly in her arms, and Tsunade is rubbing her temples while fighting a wry but fond smile. The surprise comes as Shikamaru and a blonde woman it takes Naruto a few shameful seconds to identify as Gaara's sister Temari turn away from Tsunade's desk to fix Naruto with a matching set of shocked expressions. Shikamaru breaks into a lopsided smile, well, look what the cat dragged in. Temari crosses her arms over her chest with a tiny smirk, looks like I have more good news to bring home. It's good to see you again, Naruto. Same to you, Naruto replies, strolling further in. What dragged you guys all the way up here? They arrived on time for an appointment. Tsunade cuts in, shooting Sasuke a pointed look. Want to tell me how a 5-minute walk took 10 minutes? Your apprentice's Fang Club is how, Jiraiya snorts, hooking a thumb at Sasuke. We had to beat them off with a stick. Sasuke drags a hand down his face and grumbles, should have used the rooftops. Tsunade lets a soft, breathy laugh sneak through before turning her sharp eyes back to Naruto. So, I trust your time away was productive. Naruto grins wide and puts his hands on his hips, you know it. You're looking at a whole new ninja, Grandma, believe it. Tsunade steeples her fingers in front of her mouth, really. Talk is one thing, Naruto, and we all know you're the biggest talker in the Leaf Village. Can you back it up? Naruto's grin drops as he surveys Tsunade's office. I mean, sure, but I don't think you want me to make your office any more of a mess, so. Tsunade rolls her eyes, not here, obviously. I think a test is in order to see how far you've really come. Temari perks up and remarks, I could administer the test, Lady Tsunade, if you'd allow it. And I'm sure my escort would be more than happy to help, wouldn't he? Shikamaru lets his eyes slide closed as he groans, really? This is how you want to welcome the kid back. Temari flashes him a predatory grin, no better way to catch up, in my opinion. Tsunade almost looks proud as she smiles over at Temari, I appreciate the offer, but I already have a proctor lined up. He should have been here 10 minutes ago, but... From the corner of his eye Naruto sees a flicker outside one of the far windows. As he hears it open Naruto turns to the sound, his eyes going wide at the source. Sorry everyone, Kakashi sighs as he perches on the windowsill, I was on my way over here when this fruit cart. Naruto wants to be happy to see Kakashi again. He is happy to see Kakashi again, for the most part. But deep in his gut he feels something twist at the fact that today, of all days, Kakashi is late. Naruto shoves his darker thoughts to the back of his mind and puts his grin back on, I can't believe your excuses have gotten even worse, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's eye crinkles at the corner, well, look who's all grown up. Welcome back, Naruto. Naruto perks up and jogs over to the window, oh yeah. Before I forget, I have a souvenir for you. Kakashi's eyebrow lifts as Naruto rummages around in his weapon pouch, then leaps all the way up to disappear behind his hair when Naruto presents him with the little green book. He can hear half the room let out some form of a groan as they get a glimpse at the cover. Jiraiya makes an indignant grunt, but doesn't complain out loud. Kakashi's eye is nearly sparkling, is this? Naruto nods, you better believe it. What good is having an in with famous people if you can't bum favors off them for your friends? He hears Tsunade sputter from her desk, famous. Infamous is more like it, and even that's pushing it. Jiraiya cuts in, oh I'm sorry, how many bestseller lists are your books on? That's right, none. Yeah, because I have a real job. Naruto, Kakashi puts his hand on Naruto's shoulder and looks him in the eye, you're my new favorite. Sasuke comes around Naruto's other side, spluttering, what happened to I don't play favorites? Kakashi smirks beneath his mask, I don't play favorites, but I can still have them, can't I? Naruto sticks his tongue out at Sasuke and Sasuke shoots him a withering glare, whispering, you know I live with this asshole now, right? I have to live with the consequences of your actions. Naruto immediately blanches, I am so sorry. Ahem, excuse me, Shizun shouts above the bickering, now that everyone's here, Lady Tsunade, should we? Yes, you're right, Tsunade picks up, schooling her voice back into a somewhat authoritative tone, Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi will be testing you both in a challenge of his design. How you fare will determine your future status. Naruto quirks a brow, our future status? What does that? With all due respect, ma'am, Sasuke talks over him, crossing his arms over his chest, Won't teaming up with me give Naruto an unfair advantage? Naruto feels another twinge in his gut. What's that supposed to mean? Sasuke shrugs a shoulder. Kakashi and I have been training and taking missions together for the past 6 months. The information I have plus our numbers advantage gives our side an edge over his. Another twinge, like something in Naruto's stomach is tying itself into a knot. He can tell from the look on his face Sasuke isn't trying to rub it in that he's spent more time with Kakashi recently than Naruto has in their entire time as a team, but it sure sounds like he is. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Kakashi drawls as he thumbs through the first few pages of the new Ika Paradise. You've been training and fighting with me, but that just means I've been training and fighting with you. I have the exact same edge you do, plus an extra 20 years of experience as a ninja. And on top of that, neither of us has any idea what Naruto's hiding up his sleeve, do we? Naruto can't help a smug grin while the tips of Sasuke's ears flush and he looks away, muttering, yeah, fair enough. Naruto pounds a fist into his hand and crows, alright then, let's get right to it. Lead the way, sensei. Kakashi's eyebrow hops up again, and not give you any time to settle in? No, this can wait. Go ahead and see some more of the sights. I'll meet you both at training ground 3 in 2 hours. Don't be late. He disappears in a flicker of lightning quick movement, and Naruto can't help grumbling, where does he get off telling us that? Sasuke bumps Naruto with his shoulder, bet he just wants to get a head start on that book while I'm not in the apartment to hear him jay. Shikamaru comes up from behind and claps them each on the shoulder. 2 hours sounds like just enough time for a bite to eat. Since we can't test you, we'll treat you. How's that sound, Temari? Temari rolls her eyes, doesn't matter to me. I'll mark it down as a mission expense and get it reimbursed. Naruto's grin is back in place, sweet. Hope the Sand Village is ready to go bankrupt, cause I'm gonna clean Ichiraku out. Sasuke shoots a playful glare at Shikamaru, look at what you've done. You've caused a financial crisis, all for this dumbass. Shikamaru just shrugs as he leads them out of the office, no better dumbass to do it for. Once the office doors close behind the 4 young ninja, Jiraiya arches a brow and remarks, Uchiha did have a point, you know. He has spent a lot of time facing off against Kakashi, Shizune adds, futzing with Taunton's necklace, and since he has the Sharingan, he has perfect recall of all of Kakashi's tricks. You're sure they won't have an advantage? Shizune I understand, but Jiraiya, you know as well as I do what the bell test is really for, Tsunade replies, returning to her paperwork as she speaks, it's not about winning or losing, not in the strictest sense, anyway. She looks Jiraiya in the eye as she decisively scribbles her signature, the bell test is about teamwork. The point of this test is to see if Naruto, who's spent 2.5 years working solo, and Sasuke, who's spent that time with people who know how to work together on instinct, can meet in the middle and learn how to be a team again. Oh, I see, Shizune exclaims, eyes lighting up, and they've been developing on different paths with different mentors, we'll need to see how they can adjust to someone whose skill set they don't know. Jiraiya examines Tsunade for a long moment before he says, it's not just that, is it? Tsunade reads over, fills out, and signs off on a few more forms. Silence fills the room, thick and heavy like snow. Naruto and Sasuke. When things are going well, they bring out the best in each other, Tsunade sighs, setting her pen aside to rub at her strength of 100 seal, that competitive streak they both have makes them push the other to get better, and they grow faster together than they would apart. But, when things aren't going well, when they aren't seeing eye to eye, they can bring out the worst in each other just as easily. Shizune's eyes drop to the floor, we've all seen how ugly it can get between them when they're not getting along, and that was when they both were less formidable, let's just say. They seemed like they were doing fine here in the office, but there's still baggage there, Jiraiya cuts in, I could see it on Naruto's face. Tsunade, I get what you're trying to do, but what you think is just a rabbit hole could be hiding a fox. Tsunade arches a brow, eyes shining bright and fierce, then it's a good thing they're up against a hound. Lunch was probably a bad time to ask after his friends. As Temari, Shikamaru, and Sasuke rattle off the various promotions to Chunin and Jonin everyone has earned, Naruto can feel his ramen making the journey back up his digestive tract. It almost breaks through when they casually drop the fact that Gaara actually managed to become the 5th Kazekage. He has to force it back down with an audible, visible gulp. That's amazing, Naruto exclaims, shoving all the bad feelings down to make room for all the good ones. I knew he had it in him, but to power through a whole election like that. When you get back, tell him I said congratulations. Temari smiles and chuckles. Certainly. She cranes her neck around to look at Sasuke. Should I also tell him you enjoyed your succulent of the month, Sasuke? Sasuke rolls his eyes and makes an affirmative, yet aggrieved, noise around his mouth full of ramen. Naruto cocks his head to one side. Huh? Succulent of the what? Whenever someone from Sand comes to the village on official business, Gaara always sends them off with a cactus for Sasuke, Shikamaru explains. Don't ask me how or why that arrangement started up. Sasuke finishes his bite and clarifies, some succulents are good for making into poisons or medicines. Gaara grows them as a hobby, so the easiest way to get my hands on samples is to just ask him. And the flowers make good treats for Katsuyu, so that's something. Naruto cringes. Oh yeah, Grandma Tsunade would be teaching you how to summon slugs, huh? Talk about gross. You think you're grossed out by them, Kakashi can't cope with them at all, Sasuke scoffs. I'm not allowed to summon them into the apartment unless it's a life or death emergency, that's how bad it is. Naruto throws his head back with a cackle. Who knew Kakashi was such a wimp about slimy stuff? That's what we should do for the test, just throw slugs and frogs at him till he gives up. Or until he makes his dogs eat them all, Temari remarks, making both Naruto and Sasuke go pale. You only think they're gross till they're saving your life, Shikamaru comments. If you didn't have Katsuyu during that shit show out near the rain border, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. You would have been fine, Sasuke chuffs, missing an arm, maybe, but still fine. I think you both are forgetting who really saved your life, Temari remarks, sitting up straight and looking down her nose at Shikamaru. Shikamaru holds her gaze for a moment before remarking, yeah, Kankuro really came in clutch with that sand backup. Temari jabs her chopsticks at Shikamaru's throat. You know I know over 30 ways to kill a man with these, Nara. Shikamaru just rolls his eyes. With sweet talk like that I have no idea how some lucky guy hasn't snapped you up yet. Guys, we're in public, Sasuke groans. Please save it for Temari's hotel room. They both turn to glare sharply at Sasuke across Naruto. We aren't. Yeah, sure, Sasuke sighs. Try that line on Naruto instead of me, see if he believes it. After all, he hasn't heard it a million times. Naruto's eyes go wide as he finally catches up with the banter before shooting a mischievous grin at them. Go on, tell me what you guys definitely aren't doing. Shikamaru keeps his glare on Sasuke and spits, you're the worst. You are the absolute worst. Temari shuts her eyes tight and snaps, Sasuke is under the impression that there's something going on between us. I don't know where he got the idea. Yeah, I don't know, Sasuke cuts in. Maybe it was the time you rescued Shikamaru at the rain border, or that time in the land of rivers, or that time in the land of grass, or that time in rain, or that other time in rain, or that other time in rain. Hey, that last time I rescued her, Shikamaru interrupts, at least let me keep one scrap of dignity. Temari's lips quirk up in a smirk. Oh, from what I remember you threw your last scrap of dignity away when Akimichi went down. Shikamaru nudges her with his shoulder. Like you were any better when they grabbed Gaara. We all lost it when they grabbed Gaara, Sasuke adds around a mouth full of noodles. I mean, that almost started a war. Naruto's eyes can't go any wider. What? When did that happen? Sasuke frowns for a moment before pointing a chopstick at Shikamaru. You tell the story better. No, I don't. Sasuke has already shoved another bite of ramen into his mouth, so Shikamaru just sighs. What a drag. All right. So, a little while before Gaara was elected Kazekage, we got what was marked as a C-rank disaster relief mission for a border village hit by a flood. Naruto tries to absorb the story of disaster relief turning into counter-terrorism turning into stopping a war in 5 easy steps, but he can't help but focus on how Temari butts in with corrections and Sasuke will make the odd sarcastic comment, how the three of them have a rhythm to their conversation that Naruto can hardly keep up with. They have their own language of inside jokes and anecdotes and mannerisms, and just when Naruto picks up something he remembers from before he left he's hit by something completely new. It's one thing to be thinking about everything he's missing, day in and day out, for 2 years. It's another entirely to actually see it. Naruto's surrounded by friends, but he feels weirdly alone. Naruto fills his mouth with ramen so they won't notice that he doesn't have anything to say. Sakura is in the middle of trimming her hair when a snake comes slithering out of her sink's drain. Sakura takes a moment to stare at the snake before asking, "Do you have a message for me, Ishii?" The little brown adder slithers towards the walls of the sink. Sakura sets her kunai down and dips a hand down for Ishii to slither around, winding her way up her arm and settling around her neck like a scarf. Sakura strokes a line from the top of her head along her spine. Ishii hisses, "Lord Orochimaru wishes to see you in his audience chamber. The matter is urgent." Sakura knows Ishii can feel her pulse jump against her belly, but she keeps the rest of her tells locked down. "I see. Tell him I'll be there as soon as I can." Ishii periscopes her head up to bump against Sakura's chin, "Move with haste." He did not seem pleased. Sakura lets her mouth tilt up at one corner. Is he ever? Ishii's hiss could be interpreted as a laugh, depending on the ear. She slides back down Sakura's arm and into the sink, disappearing down the drain. Sakura watches the drain for a moment before she brings her kunai back up to her hair. She finishes trimming the back, then sloppily chops 2 inches off the bottom of her bangs. She surveys her work. It's short enough in the back that nobody could get much purchase, but the bangs. She considers pinning them back. After all, she'll need to see what she's doing now more than ever. No, better not. Pins can fall out. Pins can be used as weapons against her as much as she can use them in a pinch herself. Sakura steps back from the sink and brushes the last strands and chunks of pink hair off her shirt and leggings. She heads over to her cot, pulling her yukata on and tying her obi tight around her middle. Just as she was taught in the academy, she hides extra weapons in her obi, just in case. She straps her kunai holster to her thigh, pins her weapons pouch to her obi, and pulls on her sandals. Before she puts on her gloves, Sakura pulls the backpack full of all the other possessions she cared to keep out from under her cot. She rolls up her right sleeve, revealing a still healing tattoo of her snake summoning contract. Sakura bites her left thumb hard enough to draw blood and drags the blood up along the tattoo, wincing at the stinging pain. She runs through the signs and slaps her palm on the ground. In a burst of smoke, a black-scaled snake as thick as a man's waist and twice as long as Sakura is tall appears coiled at Sakura's feet. Even compressed, she takes up a quarter of the floor space in her room, though that says more about the size of the room than the size of the snake. Sakura smiles and kneels down to stroke along her head as she says, "Hello, Kiyohime. Do you remember that day I told you might be coming soon?" Her tongue flickers out and her voice comes with it. "It is upon us at last, is it? A shame." "Yes. Yes it is," Sakura sighs, hefting her pack around in front of her. "You remember what I asked of you?" Kiyohime responds by unhinging her jaw and swallowing Sakura's backpack. When she speaks again, it sounds like a human trying to speak while sucking on a hard candy. "Do not be long, or I will swallow you, too." Sakura just smiles and strokes beneath Kiyohime's chin. "Thank you, Kiyohime. I won't." The snake tastes the air one last time before bursting into pale smoke. As it dissipates, Sakura makes a circuit of her tiny room. Anything she'd usually have squirreled away in secret compartments or seals she just sent off with Kiyohime. Her room looks exactly as it did the day she came to Sound, with its bare stone walls and rough dirt floor. Sakura spares a glance toward the cameras by the door. If Kabuto did his part, those should have conveniently gone dark an hour ago. She walks back to her sink and taps her fist against the porcelain in a Leaf Village code, with combinations of short taps, long taps, and pauses coming together to form letters and words. Everythingready. Sakura waits for a few moments before her faucet starts to drip, the drips coming in the same code, ILLCLEAR. LETSGO. Sakura nods once and turns on her heel. She stalks towards the door. She pauses as she takes hold of the handle. Everything she's been working toward, all her efforts over these 2 years in the dark, will finally bear fruit. She can feel her headband sitting heavy in her weapons pouch. She resists its call. She can only wear it again when her mission ends, however it ends. Sakura takes a deep breath and opens the door. Time to shed her skin. Chapter 3, 2. Naruto bangs his head against the chain link fence, creating a jingling rhythm to soundtrack his groans of, "I can't believe he's late again for the second time today." Sasuke crosses his arms over his chest with a sigh. "I don't know how he does it. Genuinely I don't. It's almost impressive." "Seriously? You live with him now and you still don't know why he's so late all the time?" Naruto grouses. "The dude's gotta be cursed or something, believe it." Sasuke winces to himself. "Well, I mean, you might not be wrong, but..." Naruto peers owlishly at him, cocking his head to the side. "What do you mean?" Sasuke purses his lips, considering Naruto for a few moments, before replying, "Let's just say he's lost a lot of people in his life. The specifics are his story to tell, not mine." Naruto frowns and looks away, muttering, "So I'll never know." "Great." Sasuke's brow furrows. "Now what does that?" There's a puff of smoke at the top of the fence, out of which comes a sheepish, "Sorry about that, guys. I ran into Hana and Yazuka on the way here and we got to talking about our dogs and..." "I'll give you this much, your excuses are starting to get more believable," Sasuke snorts. "Come on, the sun's going down, let's get to it." Kakashi drops down onto the other side of the fence, opening it from the inside and gesturing for them to come in. Sasuke has to pause once he's through to take the scene in. The three posts, the memorial stone, the wide river, he knows these things better than he knows some people's faces. Training Ground 3. Where it all started. Naruto's eyes are doing a circuit of the grounds, wide with wonder. "Man. Now this takes me back." "Yeah," Sasuke breathes, "it's been a while for me, too." Lately it's been easier to keep his mind occupied and focused on the present, but the one downside to Naruto's return is how it brings back so many memories. There had been 3 of them the last time Sasuke was here. They'd gathered to wait for Kakashi, and when he'd popped in he'd told them they were just gonna train, since they didn't have a mission. Almost as an afterthought, he'd mentioned that they were breaking early to have a celebratory lunch with Team 10 to celebrate Shikamaru's promotion to Chunin. Naruto had been loudly flabbergasted by the news. Sasuke had been quietly surprised and slightly disappointed that Shikamaru was the only promotion. But then he'd gotten a glance at Sakura. She'd been staring into space, face blank, eyes unmoving. He'd tried to ask her what was wrong. When she said she was fine, it sounded like she was saying it from the bottom of a deep dark pit. She'd stayed that way all through training, until her chakra control faltered. Sakura's chakra control, Sakura never faltered, and she dropped into the river. Kakashi had sent her home, because something was wrong, but she wasn't about to tell them what. They should have pressed her, shouldn't have relented until she let it out and they could have found something to say, something to do that would have made her stay but... Sasuke digs his nails into his palm. There's no point in thinking about the past. Not when the future is still wide open. Naruto turns to Kakashi, arms folded behind his head. "So are we gonna get on with this test or are we gonna keep sitting around?" Kakashi's mask warps in a smirk and he replies, always so impatient. "But I suppose you're right." He reaches into his weapons pouch and pulls out a familiar pair of bells. "It's about time we got started." Sasuke and Naruto's brows both hop up as they exchange surprised glances. "Wait, are we really?" "Since we're already reminiscing, it seemed appropriate," Kakashi replies, jingling the bells for emphasis. "It's the same basic test. You have until sunrise to get these bells away from me. All the same rules apply. No techniques or weapons are off limits, and..." "We remember the drill," Naruto cuts in, tightening his headband. "We gotta be ready to kill you, or we can kiss our chances of passing goodbye." Sasuke ties his jacket around his waist and pulls on his gloves as he adds, "If you think you're gonna get away with reading while fighting us again, you've got another thing coming." "Oh, I'm more than aware of that," Kakashi replies, pulling his headband up to reveal the Sharingan. "I get the feeling I'm going to have my hands full with the two of you." Naruto looks to Sasuke from the corner of his eye. His mouth quirks up in a smirk, and before Sasuke can decipher what that means, Naruto's reaching into his weapons pouch and tossing a handful of shuriken at Kakashi. Kakashi immediately hits the deck, tossing his own bevy of projectiles at Naruto's feet. Naruto leaps over them and crosses his fingers in the sign for Shadow Clone Jutsu, summoning a clone into the air above his head. As the clone falls, Naruto forms the ram sign, his body transforming into a massive shuriken. The clone grabs Naruto the shuriken out of the air and lobs him at Kakashi. Kakashi stays low, Naruto the shuriken flying over his head. Naruto transforms back in midair and lands behind Kakashi, reaching his hands into his jacket and drawing them out with the Tekagi Shuko. Sasuke sent Naruto off with firmly affixed to his hands. Naruto lets out a canine snarl and slashes for Kakashi. Kakashi nimbly dances around the strike, grabbing Naruto by the wrist and twisting his arm around his back with one hand while the other puts a kunai to Naruto's throat. Like I said, always so impatient, Kakashi begins, only for one of Naruto's discarded shuriken to burst into a puff of smoke. When the smoke clears, another Naruto is at Kakashi's back with his own kunai, poised and ready to strike. The grin on Naruto's face has a feral, ragged edge. Sasuke can't help one of his own. Naruto's knack for using clones and transformations for mischief has come into its own on the battlefield. He didn't know a person could even transform themselves into something as small as a standard shuriken, but Naruto has always been full of surprises. Kakashi smirks beneath his mask and continues, clever, certainly, but still impatient. I didn't even say start yet. Sasuke cracks his knuckles, then what are we waiting for? Kakashi lets out a soft chuckle, fine then. Ready. Set. Start. Orochimaru curses his own flair for the poetic as Sakura comes through the door to his audience chamber. Bathed in the cold blue light from the fish tank, strange shadows flickering across her form, she looks exactly like the girl Kabuto brought to him 2 years ago. She's still a tiny thing, barely 4 inches taller than when she arrived and certainly a few pounds lighter. Her clothes, feminine and dark and floral, only make her seem all the more fragile. Like he could reach out and snap her like a twig with his bare hands. And he intends to. But he knows she won't make it easy for him. Sakura's eyes alight on him across the long oak table and she bows from the waist, "You sent for me, sir." Orochimaru balances his chin atop his steepled fingers as he replies, "I did indeed. It seems our dear Yugo has decided to go on walkabout. He escaped from his holding cell 10 minutes ago." Sakura's eyes go just the right amount of wide and she gasps, "What? 10 minutes ago? We need to get out there, we need to find him before he..." "Don't play dumb," Orochimaru snaps, Sakura freezing in place at the sound of his voice, "You're far too smart to be any good at it." Sakura could have made a beautiful actress in another life. She doesn't break character for even a moment, choking on her words and staring at him in mute apprehension. Her eyes swim between fear of Yugo and fear of him. "Yes, sir." Orochimaru slowly rises from the table and stalks toward her at a creeping pace. The only cells capable of containing Yugo are those that have been made specifically for him. He has been perfectly capable of breaking out for months now. And yet, he hasn't. He chooses today. "Would you like to know what else has been happening today, little flower?" Sakura takes a half step back, I don't." Orochimaru's eyes narrow and he forms half a seal. He grabs hold of Sakura's curse mark, squeezing down. Sakura's eyes go wide and her teeth clench, a cry forcing itself out through the cracks as she nearly falls. One hand catches the back of a chair and the other flies to her shoulder in a vain attempt to staunch the flow of pain. Kabuto's mission report is running horrifically late. Orochimaru begins, Suijutsu has disappeared into the pipes. Prisoners are being shuffled around like cards on orders I didn't give. And all the while the security cameras and wiretaps are all going haywire, all at once. Coincidence? Lordo, Sakura cuts herself off with a sharp scream as Orochimaru presses on the mark. She collapses to one knee, eyes screwing shut. Orochimaru pauses without his own approval as he catches tears beating at the corners of her eyes. He forces himself forward and snarls, "Absolutely not. I wonder, just how stupid do you think I am? I knew you'd betray me one day, but to think you'd do it this blatantly. Suffice to say, I'm disappointed, little flower. I thought I trained you better than this. I thought I made sure to teach you never to underestimate your opponent." Sakura's knee buckles and she crumples into the fetal position. The sound she lets loose is a broken, high-pitched sob. Orochimaru stops above her body, the rest of his monologue caught in his throat. Is this it? Is this really all it takes to make her revert to being a scared little girl? is pressing down on her sorest spot until it nearly bursts, really enough to break down all of Sakura's carefully constructed barriers? No. Of course it isn't. Because he trained her. That realization gives Orochimaru a precious half-second to notice the water in the fish tank starting to bubble and churn. He lets go of Sakura's curse mark and brings his arms up to block his eyes a heartbeat before the entire tank explodes. Broken glass and water come spraying out from all sides, pelting and drenching him in equal measure. He blindly reacts to the sound of water flowing and something sharp cutting through the air, a hand flying up to painfully parry a blade. Orochimaru whirls to the source, eyes opening to see Suijutsu's body flowing up and out of the water coating the table. The boy grins with a mouth full of serrated teeth. This has been a long time coming, old-timer. Suijutsu's hands soar through signs. His feet dissolve, melding with the water covering the table and floor. It all lights up with chakra, rising up in floating globules that shudder before firing shards of glass like dozens of fragile bullets. Orochimaru ducks and rolls beneath the worst of it, a few splinters clipping the back of his neck as he comes up at the head of the table. Before Orochimaru can form his first sign, Suijutsu flips off the table, landing at Sakura's side and dragging her over to the wall. Just in time for the door to burst inward, you go roaring through it. His arms shift into big meaty claws that let him effortlessly pick up the conference table and turn it onto its side. His flesh shifts on his elbows and the back of his calves, creating vents that jet out compressed air and send Yugo firing at Orochimaru like a rocket. The table hits Orochimaru head-on, knocking the wind out of him and pushing him all the way to the back of the room. Orochimaru's back collides painfully with the wall and his head knocks against the table. He's only between a rock and a hard place for a bare moment. Orochimaru pushes against the table and finds no resistance. The second it falls away is the second Sakura finishes a round of hand signs. Flower petals burst from her body and fill the room like smoke. Through the haze of pink, Orochimaru can barely make out the three traitors scrambling for the doorway. The petals that touch Orochimaru's skin dissolve into chakra, forcing his eyelids to droop, but he knows this trick of Sakura's too well to fall for it ever again. He forms half a seal and snarls, "Release." The petals all burst into threads of chakra before they can hit the floor, giving Orochimaru a clear view of Sakura's dress fluttering around the corner as she scurries out into the hall. For a moment, Orochimaru just stares at the doorway. There's no way that was the whole plan. He trained Sakura better than that, and Suijutsu at least is intelligent enough to know there's no outrunning him in his own hideout. No, that was just the opening gambit. The real fight starts the second he leaves the audience chamber. Orochimaru stalks after them, hissing under his breath, "Ready. Set. Start." There's a puff of smoke. Naruto lurches forward as the hands that were holding him in place disappear. When the smoke clears, Kakashi is nowhere to be found. Naruto dismisses his clone and clicks his tongue against his teeth as he scans the area for some sign of him. No tracks, no sound. Naruto channels chakra into his nose, sharpening his sense of smell, and doesn't even pick up a scent. It's like he was never there. Naruto mutters through his teeth, "Okay, all this deja vu is starting to get old." He glances over at Sasuke. He's standing with a hand on one hip and the other at his chin, brow furrowed in thought. Naruto opens his mouth to ask what's on his mind, but quickly thinks better of it. Sasuke takes being interrupted when he's thinking very poorly. Or, at least, he used to. Maybe that's changed too. Sasuke drums his fingers on his hip as he mutters, "Deja vu, huh?" He stays like that for a few moments more before perking up and, with a snap of his fingers, declaring, "I know where he is." Naruto nods and asks, "All right, how do we flush him out?" Sasuke smirks over his shoulder at Naruto, "Brace yourself." Sasuke stomps the ground. The ground breaks. The earth rumbles beneath Naruto's feet, nearly knocking him on his ass, as a jagged fissure opens up in front of Sasuke. Sections of ground jut up and out of place, soil flying everywhere. Cracks spread all the way to the river, breaking the riverbank and sending water flowing into the broken ground. When the dust clears and Naruto can get his balance again, the fissure is easily 20 feet long and 30 feet deep. 10 feet into all that broken ground, wedged between two displaced spears of stone, is a wide-eyed Kakashi. Naruto gulps. He'd thought that maybe Grandma Tsunade would teach Sasuke how to do whatever it is she does to be so strong, but him being this strong only after 2 years didn't even cross his mind. What is crossing his mind now is how it would feel to be on the receiving end of a blow like that. Suffice to say, the idea of going one-on-one with Sasuke just got a lot less appealing. I appreciate a throwback, Sensei, Sasuke calls to Kakashi, but if you keep pulling the same tricks you did 2 years ago this is gonna end badly for you. The surprised look on Kakashi's face quickly drops, true. But if you keep expecting those same old tricks, Sasuke, this is going to end badly for you. The center of Kakashi's stomach starts to glow red hot, quickly spreading out across his whole body. Sasuke backpedals and Naruto runs in to grab him by his collar and drag him back. Kakashi bursts into flames. The aftershock of chakra sends both Naruto and Sasuke flying backwards. They hit the ground and bounce, rolling for a few more feet before coming to a stop. They dust themselves off and get to their feet to find scorched earth, burning grass, and no Kakashi. Well, Naruto remarks, we flushed something out all right. That dusting of pink has found its way back to the tips of Sasuke's ears. Okay, I'll admit it, what I know about Kakashi is nowhere near as dangerous as what he knows about me. The moment he exits the audience chamber, Orochimaru catches a glimpse of Sakura, Suijutsu, and Yugo out of the corner of his left eye. He turns just in time to see them wheeling around a corner and out of sight. He rolls his eyes, but creates a shadow clone and sends it running after them anyway. Whether those are clones or an illusion, it won't do to give the game up to Sakura just yet. While his shadow clone goes left, Orochimaru goes right. As he stalks down the hall he opens his chakra sense, searching for signatures that hum in rhythm with his own. His shadow clone lights up strong and bright, like the fluorescence above his head, several yards behind him. Hovering a layer below him and a few yards to the right is a fragment of his own chakra, burning just as bright as his clone. It almost captures his attention before another signature, identical to it in every way, brightens the lower edge of Orochimaru's sensing range. Orochimaru leans against the wall, shutting one eye. Like this, with half the world drowned in darkness, it's slightly easier to focus on the floating flames of his own chakra. It's still impossible to definitively tell the genuine Sakura apart from her clone and his clone by sensation alone. With their chakra as divided as it is, the three signatures are nearly identical. Orochimaru's lips twist in something that's not angry enough to be a snarl and not proud enough to be a grin. Clever girl. Sensing alone won't give him answers, but he's never been one to rely on just one tool. Orochimaru sketches a rough mental map of the base over top of the three signatures. He designed this hideout himself, he could draw its blueprints from memory and navigate it blind. The closest signature is making its way toward the mortuary lab on this level, moving quickly and with purpose. That's definitely his clone, chasing dutifully after a genjutsu. The second signature is 15 feet down and 10 feet to his right. That part of the second layer is devoted to R&D. Narrowing it down section by section, room by room, she should be in the archives, in the temperature-controlled vault. He clicks his tongue against his teeth. Clever, clever, but too clever by half. Obviously she didn't think he'd realize where she'd sent her clone until he was already there. There's no way the girl would bring a fight to the archives. Not after the disaster in the Earth Country Mountains. The third signature is at the very bottom of the hideout. The lowest layer is provision storage and the reservoir. That signature is straining at the very edge of his perception, but close enough that he can draw out the map around it. After a moment, he's sure that signature is in the reservoir chamber. The room has plenty of space to maneuver and nothing precious, breakable, or alive stored inside. It's as out of the way as it can be in a closed system like this, giving her and her friends more than time enough to prepare while he chases down her diversions. Clever, clever, but deeply predictable. He should have broken her of that long ago. Orochimaru channels earth chakra around his body and drops into the ground, turning it into a fine sand and digging down toward the third signature. He flies through the ground like a missile through the air. In a blast of sand he breaches the ceiling, falling into a room with a double-height ceiling dominated by a deep, dark pool of water. A forest of columns keeps the ceiling from collapsing in on itself, while massive pipes and water pumps snake out of the pool and onto the catwalk surrounding it, pulling the water from the ground into the rest of the hideout. Orochimaru only catches a glimpse of Sakura on that catwalk glancing up at him, green eyes going wide, before he lands directly on top of her. They go crashing to the ground, Orochimaru with a knee on Sakura's stomach and a hand wrapped around her throat. He grins down at her and hisses through his teeth, "A clever trick, little flower, but I know you far too well to fall for it." The sun has just dipped below the horizon when Naruto and Sasuke find Kakashi again. It only takes one strike for Sasuke to uproot the tree he's hiding in and knock him out of its branches, sending him plummeting to the ground. Naruto pounces for Kakashi, claws out. Kakashi rolls away and kips up, lightning fast. Naruto tucks and rolls, coming up on the other side of the clearing while Sasuke blocks off the entrance. "It seems you have me cornered," Kakashi drawls, Sharingan spinning as he shifts into Guy's idle stance. "Whatever shall I do?" Sasuke just huffs out a breath, catching Naruto's eye over Kakashi's shoulder and calling to him, "I go high, you go low." Kakashi grins behind his mask, "Fair enough then." Lesson 1 Taijutsu. Sasuke made a big mistake saying he'd go in high. Kakashi immediately drops low and sweeps a kick at his ankles. Sasuke deftly avoids the strike, swerving out of the way, and his Sharingan blazes to life. He brings a leg up in a perfect imitation of one of Tsunade's earthquake axe kicks and Kakashi realizes he made a mistake going low. Kakashi rolls out of the way seconds before Sasuke's heel connects with empty ground and cracks it in a 1-foot radius. He surges up and clips Sasuke's jaw with an uppercut, making his teeth clack painfully together. Sasuke turns his stagger into a tactical retreat, darting out of Kakashi's reach. Kakashi looks over his shoulder to see Naruto sprinting in, keeping low, and diving to tackle his legs out from under him. Kakashi jukes out of the way and Naruto handily turns his landing into a roll. Kakashi's arms shoot out and he grabs hold of Naruto by the collar and the back of his jacket. Kakashi only rethinks his plan of throwing Naruto at Sasuke when he actually tries to heft the boy up and realizes he's much heavier than he thought he'd be. Naruto takes advantage of the momentary shock, digging in his heels and lurching forward. Kakashi stumbles. That's all the opening Naruto needs. In seconds Naruto flips the grapple around, hip-tossing Kakashi to Sasuke with a call of, "He's all yours." Sasuke knocks Kakashi to the ground with a roundhouse kick that rattles his whole skeleton. Kakashi forces his eyes open just in time to see Sasuke making a fist and driving it down towards his head. Kakashi's Sharingan spins and he breaks out a move he copied from Sasuke himself, using his core muscles to keep his shoulders on the ground and whip his legs up and around in a whirling kick that knocks Sasuke back and allows Kakashi to flip back to his feet. He doesn't have time to breathe. Naruto letting out another war cry gives Kakashi a precious few seconds to turn and see him darting in low and striking high, slashing with those steel claws for his eyes. Kakashi tucks his chin against his chest on reflex and Naruto scores the surface of his headband instead of tearing his eyes out of his skull. A disturbing thought, but at least he's taking the test seriously. There's a crackle of lightning and Kakashi's instincts take over, his head swerving out of the way of Sasuke's palm thrust as it whizzes past his ear. Kakashi pivots around in time to see Sasuke closing the distance between them, one hand glowing soft cyan and the other raining sparks. He bobs and weaves around 2 more palm thrusts, the chakra on Sasuke's hands making the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Sasuke fakes a 3rd left hook before juking to the right, revealing Naruto sprinting into range with his claws dragging through the dirt. Naruto wrenches up with his claws, a gust of chakra-laced wind following the movement of his arms and kicking up a cloud of dust directly into Kakashi's face. Kakashi's arm flies up to cover his Sharingan. He doesn't have time to protect both eyes. Dust hits his normal eye and it slams shut, stinging like a motherfucker, but Kakashi backpedals out of the cloud and reveals his Sharingan again. He's back in business, just in time to see Naruto bursting through the dust and slashing for his throat. Kakashi sneers beneath his mask, "Alright, fine, 2 can play this game," before slamming his soul right into Naruto's crotch. Naruto's face twists into an expression of complete and total agony for the split second before he bursts into smoke. A sandaled foot comes flying out through the haze and hits Kakashi in the chin, the force of the blow sending him flying up into the air. Kakashi is well above the forest canopy when an iron-strong grip wraps around his torso, flips him upside down, and starts to spin. His heart skips a beat at the sound of Sasuke's voice crying out, "Primary Lotus!" They're corkscrewing toward the ground, quicker than thought, but Kakashi's been trapped in this move by Guy enough times to have a counter. He uses all his strength to wrench one arm out of Suzuki's hold and thrust a hand out toward the ground. He molds chakra in his chest and sends it surging down his arm, coming out of his palm in a blast of compressed air that hits the ground a breath before they can. The burst of air hits them from below, shocking Suzuki into breaking his grip and sending them both scattering away. Naruto catches Suzuki out of the air and Kakashi lets himself fly into the trees, crashing through branches and eventually bouncing to a stop on the ground, several meters away. Kakashi rolls to his feet and listens for their voices. They're far away, but Naruto's sheer volume makes hearing them laughably easy. "You good?" That move always took it out of bushy brows. "I'm fine, come on." He left a trail. Kakashi spares a moment to smirk to himself. They're skilled in taijutsu, certainly, but neither one of them used the opportunity to lift the bells off him. Even with Naruto throwing dirt in his eyes, they're still fighting unbearably straight. So it falls to him to fight dirty. A clever trick, little flower, but I know you far too well to fall for it. The faint wisps of triumph in Orochimaru's chest are blown away by a roar of, "Get off her!" Orochimaru's head whips towards the sound to find Yugo lunging off a massive pipe, serrated claws slashing for his throat. Orochimaru lets go of Sakura's throat, rolling up and off of her just in time to avoid getting shredded. A piston-like growth comes jutting out of Yugo's elbow, drawing back and compressing in time with a whirling strike that tears 4 long gashes in Orochimaru's skin, revealing glimpses of the body beneath. The force of the blow knocks him off his feet, but Orochimaru sends chakra surging down his arm, dislocating his joints and stretching the limb out to grab one of the pillars in the reservoir. He retracts his arm with a sound like a rubber band snapping and sends chakra down into his feet, catching himself in a crouch on the pillar's side. The second he lands he catches sight of Sakura sprinting towards one of the pipes. Orochimaru braces his back against the pillar and throws his arms out toward the catwalk, a pair of white vipers twice as long as he is tall leaping from his sleeves and striking for Yugo and Sakura. A jet of water bursts up from between Orochimaru's pillar and the catwalk. Metal whistles through the air and blood dyes the water red as his snakes split in half. Orochimaru lets their corpses fall into the reservoir, rolling out of the way as the jet changes trajectory and splashes into the pillar. Suijutsu comes charging out, a katana and wakizashi in each hand, and strikes for Orochimaru's throat. He ducks beneath the wakizashi and jukes out of the katana's reach, just in time to spot Yugo growing 2 more boosters on his back and come flying across the gap. He lands just above Orochimaru, hitting hard enough to shake the pillar. So they have him in a pincer. But a ninja doesn't get to 50 without knowing exactly how to turn those to their advantage. Orochimaru fakes a too late dodge and lets Yugo's claws clip the side of his ear. He listens for the sound of air jetting out of Yugo's elbow piston and hits the deck, rolling around the pillar to come up on the other side. He catches sight of Suijutsu's half-liquefied form flowing around to meet him, just in time for them both to feel the impact of Yugo's fist hitting the stone. Cracks spiderweb around the pillar, crawling all the way up to the ceiling and knocking fragments of stone loose. Suijutsu swings to take his head off his shoulders. Orochimaru unhinges his jaw, Kusanagi rocketing up his throat to parry the blow. He spits the blade all the way up, grabbing the hilt and follows his parry with a riposte. He takes the ends off a lock of Suijutsu's hair, but doesn't scratch his skin. Suijutsu flows around 2 more stabs before whirling in, forcing Orochimaru further down the pillar as he ducks and dodges around his wide, frenetic strikes. What advantage Orochimaru has in reach with Kusanagi is quickly brought down to earth by Suijutsu's lightning-fast parrying reflexes, knocking the blade away with the wakizashi and slashing across his stomach with the katana. Suijutsu forces him down nearly to the water's surface before calling over his shoulder, "Yugo. Now." Orochimaru stabs for Suijutsu's throat, his blade punching straight through water. Suijutsu melts into a deluge and splashes down into the reservoir, just in time for Yugo to let out another mighty roar and slam another fist into the pillar. The cracks beneath Orochimaru's feet widen out into massive fissures, chunks of rock raining down around him. He tosses his sword from his left hand to his right, stretching out his right hand painfully far to grasp the edge of the catwalk. He pulls himself off the pillar just before it crumbles, snapping back to dangle off the edge of the catwalk. He flips up onto it, catching the sound of a booster firing off and rolling out of the way of a whirling, flying kick from Yugo. Yugo lands heavy and clumsy, leaving himself wide open. Orochimaru spins to his feet and strikes in the same fluid motion. Yugo's attention is split three ways between regaining his balance, bringing a hand up to block, and shifting that hand into a form that actually can block a blade. He gets the first two, but is too slow for the third. Kusanaga's blade cuts three of Yugo's clawed fingers off at the root. Beneath Yugo's piercing shriek, Orochimaru catches the sound of water crashing onto the catwalk to his left. He swings around and catches Suijutsu half solidified, piercing through his liquid stomach and dragging Kusanagi up to cut into his flesh and blood chest. Suijutsu jerks away, a jet of pressurized water blasting from the wound. It pushes Orochimaru back and gives Suijutsu the room to stagger out of reach. He brings his swords up into a guard stance, hardly hiding the pained grimace on his face as blood spreads through the liquid parts of his body. Orochimaru can't give chase, not when Yugo comes bounding right up into his face. The remaining fingers on his maimed hand fuse together into a sharp, drill-like point and stab for his eye. Orochimaru effortlessly parries the strike down and away. The spike rams itself into the catwalk, pinning Yugo in place. Orochimaru grins to himself, why not help the boy out of that predicament? Before Yugo can pull himself out, Orochimaru swings Kusanagi down and takes off the arm at the elbow. Blood sprays out across the ground and Yugo yowls like an angry cat. Orochimaru's eyes sweep over the battlefield. Despite their brave faces, these boys are each a blow away from death. That's not as comforting as it should be. Sakura is still nowhere to be seen, and she's at her most dangerous when she's out of sight. Come out wherever you are, little flower," he calls, voice reverberating out across the massive room, "or your friends are going to lose more than their limbs." The moon isn't yet as full as it could be, so it falls to Sasuke to take point as he and Naruto creep through the woods. The Sharingan takes the low light and turns it up, letting Sasuke pick out every broken branch on the trees above them and every scuffed footprint in the dirt below. He moves slowly and cautiously, half to keep Kakashi from getting wise too soon, and half because he has little choice. It's not often he opens the inner gates, the process still leaves him a bit dizzy. He glances over his shoulder to Naruto, who's aping Sasuke's careful stride so perfectly it's like he's the one with a Sharingan. Sasuke can only be impressed at how well Naruto's doing. It seems like Jiraiya finally managed to beat some notion of ninja having to be stealthy into the dumbass. Still couldn't get him out of the orange, though. Sasuke turns his attention back to the forest. Kakashi's trail has grown sparse, with only a snapped twig here and there letting Sasuke know he's even on the right track. Sasuke channels chakra into his nose and his ears. Kakashi's scent is faint, and the sounds of rustling in the foliage are too distant for Sasuke to tell a grown man from a squirrel or a skunk. To coin a phrase, it's quiet, too quiet. Or, rather, not quiet enough. It's like Kakashi's making sure to just leave enough of a trail to keep them on a set path. "I don't like this," Sasuke whispers, "this feels like..." There's a loud rustle from behind a large oak tree's trunk. And there would be the other shoe. A skinny, feminine form made from molded yin chakra comes staggering out from behind the tree. The projected girl's ragged hair and smooth skin are marred by bloodstains and lacerations as Senbon and Kunao stick out of her like the needles on a cactus. Her breath is coming in high-pitched wheezes, and she collapses to her knees in a heap. Her voice is familiar, but 2 years too young. Sasuke, Naruto, I'm so. Sasuke's hand snaps into half a seal and he snarls, "Release," the image of the battered Sakura dissolving into threads of chakra. Naruto's face twists into a scowl and he voices Sasuke's own thoughts, "That was a dirty trick, Kakashi-sensei." Kakashi's voice comes from a tree Sasuke's sure he isn't in. "Trust me, you haven't seen dirty." Lesson number 2, Genjutsu. Sasuke's world suddenly shifts from dull red to an eye-searingly bright crimson. He's not just seeing every leaf on the trees anymore but every cell in every leaf on every tree. His own cry of pain is louder than a train whistle in his ears and Sasuke can suddenly feel every fiber of his shirt scratching at his skin like 1,000 tiny claws. The constant low ache of his knee is a sharp, piercing pain that throbs in time with his heartbeat. He knows it's a genjutsu, it's the most blatant and transparent genjutsu Sasuke's ever seen used in a combat situation, but that doesn't change the fact that the whole world around him is too loud, too bright, too rough, too much. Sasuke's reflexes take over and his Sharingan shuts off. The world turns from a bright red to a slightly less bright blue. It barely helps. Sasuke can still hear every night bird in the forest like they're chirping in his ear, can still feel every bead of sweat pooling on his hands beneath his gloves, can taste the inside of his own mouth. Sasuke isn't sure what reflex will finally win the day, the urge to tear all his skin off or the urge to vomit on the grass. Naruto's voice is loud most days, but now it's piercing enough to shatter a whole glass house. Hold on, I've got you. Sasuke can feel Naruto pulling down the high collar of his shirt with one hand, exposing the back of his neck to the freezing night air. Something cold and wet touches Sasuke's skin, making him hiss through his teeth as Naruto draws some kind of symbol on the back of his neck. The electric burn of chakra surging through the mark makes for a half-second of the most searing, agonizing pain Sasuke has ever felt in his life. But before Sasuke has time to scream, everything ratchets down. Sasuke slowly opens his eyes to the view of a perfectly normal forest at night. The birds and crickets chirp faintly in the distance, and Sasuke can bear the feeling of his own clothes on his skin again. Sasuke's brow furrows and he reaches around to feel the back of his neck. He runs his fingers along tender first-degree burns in the shape of a rudimentary seal. Sasuke turns to Naruto, eyes wide, and eyebrows high. What did you do? Naruto grins and holds up one hand, missing its claw and bleeding from his index fingertip. The pervy sage taught me some fuinjutsu. The one I put on you's pretty handy, it activates if it senses yin chakra in your brain and breaks the genjutsu for you. Look, see, Naruto turns around and pulls down the collar of his jacket, revealing burns in the same basic shape. I had one on me, and it popped off when that first genjutsu of Sakura came out. Downside is though that it's a one and done kind of thing. Sasuke smirks as he pulls off his gloves, puts one hand on his own neck, the other on Naruto's, and channels healing chakra through both. Leave it to you to both pull off a trick and have it blow up in your face. If he were still under that genjutsu, Sasuke's sure he could hear Naruto rolling his eyes. Leave it to you to not just say thanks. Tsunade didn't beat any manners into you while I was gone, huh? Sasuke just grins. She did, actually. You clearly don't remember how bad I used to be. Sasuke had meant that as a joke, but Naruto's shoulders tighten in response to it, and Sasuke has to bite his lip to keep in a sigh. He's starting to get really sick of Naruto thinking he can keep things to himself while broadcasting them with his whole body. There'll be time for that later. Now, they have to get those bells. When he's finished, Sasuke gently smacks the spot he just healed and says, "Come on. We're burning moonlight," before turning on his heel and heading deeper into the woods. Naruto falls in step behind him like nothing happened. Come out wherever you are, little flower, or your friends are going to lose more than their limbs." Orochimaru's world explodes into a kaleidoscope of sound and color. All he can hear is at least 10 different songs all blasting over each other, each one loud and grating in its own unique way. The dull and washed-out reservoir chamber is now a blinding bright rainbow constantly shifting from one color to the next. Spots dance across Orochimaru's vision and he can't fight the reflex to cover one ear in the vain hope it'll block out some of this noise. It's a genjutsu, of course it is, but Orochimaru's instincts could care less about that. He can barely pick out Suijutsu and Yugo as they whirl with color at the same pace as the room around them. He reaches into his own mind and can feel the fine, intricate web of yin chakra laced tight around it. He curses Sakura through grit teeth. This isn't just one genjutsu, it's a cocktail of several woven into a fine tapestry. Unraveling one would be simple. Unraveling them all would require concentration and time. Orochimaru feels the rush of wind and just barely ducks out of the way, something sharp slicing a shallow line across the back of his neck. He doesn't have that kind of time. He tries and mostly fails to pivot around hard, blunt blows from Yugo's fist and fine, sharp slices from Suijutsu's swords. No matter how much he's trained his other senses, he can't deny the fact that he's a human who spends 90% of his time relying on his eyes and ears. With them both overloaded, he's just a touch too slow, a touch too close, overwhelmed enough to die from 1,000 tiny mistakes. There are options here, but all of them come with costs he'd rather not pay. He could play as defensively and evasively as possible to buy himself time to break this the old-fashioned way, but that's a waste of time he can't afford to lose. He could hunt down Sakura and break her concentration. She has to be close to be working something this intense, but that's yet another waste of time. She has his eyes and ears hostage, she can be wherever she wants. He could let one of these blows land, the pain of it shocking him out of the genjutsu. But making sure he'd survive that gamble will cost him quite a bit of chakra. In the long run, that's not a bad idea. Unimpressive as they are, his chakra reserves are still deeper than those of these children. But all three of them know that, and they don't want this fight to have a long run. Orochimaru sneers and starts gathering chakra. So it will fall to him to teach these children the value of patience. He sinks deeper into the whirling vortex of sensation, letting his dodges turn into staggers and his parries into random flailing. A blade of pressurized water pierces Orochimaru's side. One instant of horrific, rending pain is all it takes to break the genjutsu, his world dropping back into washed-out neutrals peppered with bright spots of orange, pink, and silver. He releases all his gathered chakra as the empty shell that was his body an instant ago is sliced in two at the waist, flopping onto the ground in two clean pieces. He makes them wait for it. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3, 4. Yugo is pacing frantic circles. Suijutsu is shifting from foot to foot in place, head cocked to the side. Sakura, perched upon a massive pipe, watches his body like a hungry owl. Suijutsu frowns and mutters, "Was that it?" Orochimaru grins. Of course it wasn't. He reaches up and unhinges the jaw of his substitute, pulling it open as wide as he can. Yugo and Suijutsu both choke on expletives and backpedal out of reach as he drags himself out of his own mouth, body whole and dripping with viscous fluid. He looks up through his hair, eyes locked on Sakura. "How nice of you to finally join us," he rasps. With a flick of his wrist, Kusanagi floats up and off the floor. It slices through the air, straight for Sakura, who lets out a gasp and leaps off the pipes onto the ground. His mouth opens, wide as it can go, and a torrent of snakes come pouring out. The countless snakes race across the ground, spreading out wide enough to carpet the whole catwalk. Suijutsu lets out a strangled, "Holy fuck," and starts sprinting back towards the pipes. Yugo snarls and shifts his stump into a scythe-like appendage. He swipes at the oncoming tide of snakes, but for every head he lops off 2 more pop up in its place. It's only when Sakura lets out a high, sharp whistle that he grits his teeth and starts doubling back. Sakura leaps and rolls out of the way of Kusanaga's strikes, somehow managing to keep whistling as she does. The sound loops and whirls, and as it twirls around through the ears of both Orochimaru and his snakes, the ground beneath them almost seems to soften. It feels like he's trying to move his wall of snakes through molasses. They struggle against the soft ground, crawling over each other and getting twisted up into knots. The tide slows just enough to put some distance between the snakes and their prey. Orochimaru dissects Sakura's technique in record time. She's using a sound-based genjutsu, this one far less complex than her previous attempt. In an instant he's formed half a seal and broken its hold over his mind, the catwalk firming up again beneath his feet. The snakes, however, are still struggling, still twisting, and writhing. Of course. That's the benefit of a sound-based jutsu, you can affect anything with ears. That sharp whistle was a signal, prepping Suijutsu and Yugo to break it before it could slow their steps. But the snakes are simple creatures. They're worse than useless right now, unless Orochimaru takes the time and the chakra to break the genjutsu for each and every one of them. His eyes zero in on Sakura. There's a much easier way to do that, this time. He leaves the snakes to their own devices, instead focusing on Kusanagi. Sakura pirouettes around the blade as it thrusts for her chest, dipping and ducking beneath 2 more swipes. Her eyes briefly flicker over to his before she runs through a set of signs and she disappears from sight. Orochimaru rolls his eyes and reaches out with his chakra sense, finding the fragment of his own power exactly where Sakura had been standing seconds before. Still underestimating her opponent. It's like he didn't teach her anything at all. He sends Kusanagi soaring around her in dizzying circles, coming closer and closer, his misses nearer and nearer with every passing breath. The blade passes so close it forces Sakura to drop the greater invisibility, breaking her concentration in order to dodge the blow. Orochimaru sends the blade hurting backward, hilt first, toward her throat. Sakura dodges the hilt, but doesn't see the sword pause in midair and thrust forward, stabbing through the back of her throat. She explodes into petals. Her high, warbling whistle keeps spiraling through the air. Orochimaru's eyes go wide. No. No 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 no. No. She didn't trick his chakra sense, There's absolutely he bites the side of his tongue hard enough to taste blood and reaches out again. The fragment of his chakra lights up, directly above his head. Orochimaru grabs for it and squeezes with all his might. The whistle cuts off into a sharp scream. He sends Kusanagi flying straight up and feels the fragment of chakra skittering along the ceiling like a spider, making a beeline for the nearest intact pillar to the catwalk. Orochimaru lets Kusanagi give chase until she's hit the top of the pillar. The second she does, he sends all his snakes surging off the catwalk. They swarm the pillar, slithering up it and wrapping around something solid. Sakura flickers back into view, petals nearly covering what scraps of skin she's showing, thrashing frantically against the snakes as they wind around her. They squeeze down on her arms, legs, stomach and throat. The snakes will smother Sakura alive. She is going to die down here, alone, in pain, and screaming. Orochimaru swallows the sour taste at the back of his tongue. This is no less than you deserve. He's not sure who he's talking to anymore. The moon is a good half hour from being in the center of the sky, but it lights up the river well enough as Naruto and Sasuke break through the tree line on the heels of their teacher. Kakashi sprints seamlessly from land to water, only pausing to pivot around when he's halfway across the river. Naruto can see Sasuke grin from the corner of his eye and mutter, "Good, now I won't cause a forest fire." Sasuke only has to run through horse and tiger before taking a deep breath in and spitting out a gigantic fireball. Naruto shields the bottom of his face from the heat and aftershock of chakra, squinting to get a look at Kakashi past the flames. Kakashi isn't even making an effort to move out of the way. His hands are flashing through hand signs too fast for Naruto to track before slapping flat on the surface of the river. Lesson number 3: Ninjutsu. Water Style, Water Dragon Jutsu. The water glows beneath Kakashi's hands and surges up in the shape of a roaring dragon, jetting forward to swallow the great fireball before it can reach Kakashi. Steam bursts from the dragon's mouth like smoke, cutting off visibility, but the sound of rushing water is all Naruto needs to know that dragon is about to crash down on them like a tsunami. If it hits them, it's gonna knock them on their asses and leave Sasuke soaked. A soaked Sasuke is a Sasuke that'll electrocute himself if he tries to use any lightning style. Naruto speeds through hand signs, kneading chakra around his heart, and throws his hands out in front of himself. Out from his palms comes a powerful gust of hot wind. The steam disperses in time for Naruto to see the wind hit the water dragon head-on, forcing it up and over their heads. Kakashi forms half a seal and the water immediately loses its shape, turning from a dragon into a formless deluge. The water sprays out and down. Naruto chokes on a swear and shifts the wind as quickly as he can to curve up and around. The wind forces the water out in a wide circle, only a fine drizzle falling onto the two of them. Sasuke's eyes light up with the Sharingan as he looks between Naruto and their misted surroundings. "Can you use wind style to launch things?" Naruto shrugs a shoulder. "It's pretty much the only thing I can do with it half the time." Bolts of electricity come sparking down Sasuke's arm, collecting in his palm. "What about people?" Naruto grins, wide and ferocious. "Say no more." Naruto grabs Sasuke by the collar and the back of his shirt, pulling a yelp out of him as he swings him around in big circles. He needs wind chakra and pours it into his arms, releasing it in a jet stream when he throws Sasuke out over the river and sending him rocketing at Kakashi. Sasuke finds his bearings in midair and his Chidori crackles to life, lighting up the night sky as he dive bombs toward Kakashi. For half a second, Naruto is sure they've got him. Earth Style. Bones of the Earth. 6 pillars of stone burst up and out of the river. One rises up beneath Kakashi, sending him up 20 feet above the water and out of Sasuke's reach. Another comes up right in front of Sasuke. Sasuke's arm punches through the stone, down to his forearm, the Chidori fizzling out. As Sasuke tries to wrench his arm free, Naruto chews on his lower lip, frantically trying to remember what Jiraiya taught him about which chakra natures are good against which. Water beats fire, he knows that, but what beats earth? Naruto's eyes go wide and he's immediately crossing his fingers to summon 5 more clones. The clones all form identical hand signs, take deep breaths, and blow out powerful gusts of air to create a wall of pure force. The wind hits the pillars and the pillars bend, then break. Kakashi is blown off his pillar, but catches himself midair and rides the wind like a gliding bird down to the water's surface. Sasuke was much less prepared. He's buffeted by the wind and knocked down to the water's surface, barely giving him time to messily coat his body in chakra and land on the river instead of in it. He grits his teeth and shouts over the sound of the raging gale, "Fucking warn me next time." "Sorry." Naruto calls as he leaps up and lets the wind carry him out over the river. He was supposed to ride it until he landed right on top of Kakashi, but Kakashi forces himself up into a crouch, speeds through hand signs, and in an instant the wind is eaten alive by a gigantic wall of fire. Naruto's clones cut off the air supply and Naruto drops like a stone, but it's too little too late. What would have been a sizable flame on its own has become a raging inferno thanks to all the oxygen Naruto fed it, and it's racing toward him faster than Naruto can form hand signs. Naruto cuts the flow of chakra to his feet and drops beneath the surface of the river. He swims as low as he can before turning to look up. For a moment, the entire surface glows a bright orange as the fire rages. Then the water to Naruto's left shifts and swirls up toward the surface and, with a distant hiss, the fire goes out. Naruto can feel the turbulence of the water being continuously pulled up toward a shadow on the surface, probably Sasuke. He has Kakashi distracted. This is the only shot Naruto's going to get. He disperses all but one of his clones, the lucky survivor diving into the river and swimming to his side. He holds out a hand and the clone starts shaping chakra into a tight, spinning orb in his palm. As the clone works on his Rasengan, Naruto keeps an eye on the shadows above him. The water keeps churning as Sasuke keeps pulling it up, keeping Kakashi at a distance. The Rasengan is almost complete when Kakashi's shadow disappears in a bright, crackling light bursts to life. It expands out across the entire surface of the river, dissolving down into it and not quite reaching Naruto, but getting uncomfortably close. He can't hear much, but there's a warbled sound that's too close to Sasuke screaming for Naruto's liking. His clone pulls back and fires off another gust of wind style, sending Naruto rocketing up and out of the river. Naruto breaches the surface, Rasengan whirling, a few feet away from Kakashi. Sasuke is on hands and knees a few yards away, panting heavily, with skin that is either smoking or steaming. Naruto grits his teeth in a snarl and sprints straight for Kakashi, who whirls around to face him, eyes wide. "Take this." Rasengan. Naruto didn't even see Kakashi make the hand signs. He throws out a hand and fires a whirling gyre of wind, hitting Naruto square in the chest and knocking him up and away. Naruto's concentration on the Rasengan drops and the threads of whirling chakra unravel like a ball of yarn falling down the stairs. Kakashi whips his arm up and the wind changes direction, dragging Naruto in an arc through the air over his head. Once Naruto hits the apex of his arc, Kakashi slices his arm through the air and the wind dunks Naruto down onto the surface of the river, sending Naruto bouncing and rolling directly into Sasuke. Before Naruto can even think about getting back up, Sasuke's gloved hand has fisted itself in his collar and he's being dragged toward the riverbank. Naruto claws at his hand and shouts, "Hey, let go, we're making a tactical retreat." Sasuke shouts, "Come on your feet," before he's done. Naruto's eyes dart back to Kakashi, whose hands are a blur of signs as chakra seeps out of his feet and into the river. The whole river. Naruto's eyes go wide and he manages to pull himself up as Sasuke drags him, breaking into a sprint once he's all the way up. Naruto and Sasuke make it to the riverbank just in time for Kakashi to pull the whole river up into a tidal wave and send it racing toward them. Thanks to their tactical retreat, the worst of it doesn't land on them, but the very edge of the wave crashing down behind them is enough to knock the two off balance and send them sprawling end over end past the tree line, back into the woods. The two thoroughly soaked and thoroughly battered boys take a moment to cough and curse through the pain in the dirt. Sasuke is the first to get up, pulling himself to his knees and taking deep breaths. Naruto watches as, in rhythm with his breathing, Sasuke coats his very raw and slightly charred skin with a thin layer of pale cyan chakra. The angry red burns slowly start to shift back to Sasuke's natural pallor. Naruto props himself up on one hand and grouses, "Okay, what's the move now? We tactically retreated but we still haven't gotten the..." Sasuke snaps through grit teeth, "Shut up, just shut up." Naruto scowls. There, at least, is something familiar. The second the snakes swerve away from him and Yugo, Suijutsu leaps into action by literally leaping off the catwalk. He shifts from solid to liquid a second before he hits the surface, the force dispersing along with his body across the water's surface. First order of business is pulling water up into his chest, using it to fill in and rebuild everything Orochimaru pierced with Kusanagi. He lets his chakra spread out through the water, expanding his senses in proportion to the scale of the reservoir. He catches sight of the snakes swarming the pillar, surging up it and dragging Sakura down. The water lights up with his chakra as he takes hold of the reservoir. He fires a massive jet of highly pressurized water at the pillar, cutting cleanly through the mass of snakes as well as the stone beneath. The snakes lose their grip on Sakura and she goes plummeting toward the water's surface. Suijutsu molds the water around his chakra, drawing it up and into a massive, blurry version of his own body. He catches Sakura with one gigantic, wet hand. She sinks into his palm and has to doggy paddle to keep her head above water. Suijutsu balls his other hand into a fist the size of a boulder and slams it down on the catwalk, missing Orochimaru and Yugo by an inch and punching straight through the catwalk. Orochimaru backpedals away from the gap and Yugo leaps easily over it, charging after Orochimaru. Suijutsu is about to try asking Sakura what the move is when, out of the corner of his eye, he catches her taking a deep breath and dropping down into his hand. The feeling of someone swimming through his arm, across his chest, and down his other arm is going to haunt Suijutsu's dreams for at least a week. Sakura comes bursting out of the back of his fist, kicks off the wall, and lands a yard away from Orochimaru. She runs through horse and tiger and rolls to press her palms to the stone of the catwalk, lime green chakra flowing into the stone catwalk below Orochimaru's feet. It breaks apart into jagged chunks beneath him, but Orochimaru is still faster than her. Chakra surges down into his feet and he sprints across the breaking ground, leaping onto one of the larger pipes. Suijutsu reaches out and grabs the pipe as easily as he'd grab the hilt of a sword. He tears it out of the wall, a chunk of the wall coming with it. Orochimaru isn't thrown by the sudden movement, running along the pipe and leaping onto the water pump it had been attached to. Orochimaru drops to one knee atop the water pump and points a finger like a pistol at Suijutsu. A bright, impossibly tiny pinprick of chakra gathers on the tip of his finger. He fires off the bead of chakra at Suijutsu's chest, hitting the target Suijutsu so graciously made bigger for him. Suijutsu doesn't even have time to regret it. The second the bead of chakra hits it bursts outward into a massive ball of lightning, the electricity coursing through Suijutsu's body. He can't even hear himself scream. He's being burned alive from the inside out, reservoir water sloughing off him like fat off the bone. The world goes white. All he can feel is the pain and the rush of wind as his body falls with the rest of the water. Something hits him from the side and his momentum suddenly changes direction, sideways rather than forward. The distant sounds of battle are overwhelmed by the sound of rapid wing beats, right in his ear. The world starts to fade back in, and Suijutsu is treated to the blurry image of Sakura, up close and fully transformed. He takes a bleary look around to find himself flying away from Orochimaru, slaloming around the columns in the reservoir. Sakura must be carrying him. He shuts his eyes and mutters, "I'm gonna get airsick and throw up all over you, I hope you know that." "Throw up on me later," Sakura snarls, twirling around in midair to look back toward Orochimaru and Yugo. "I need you back in the game now." Suijutsu's eyes are drawn over to the catwalk by a loud whoosh. Yugo is knocked back by a massive gust of wind, rolling to a stop at the edge of one of the breaks in the catwalk. He leaps to his feet and points his stump at Orochimaru, the end shifting into one of his boosters and firing a blast of compressed air at Orochimaru. Orochimaru's hands dart through signs and he conjures another pinprick of chakra, this time right in front of his chest. The compressed air hits the bead of chakra and it expands into a massive fireball. Orochimaru sends it flying back at Yugo, hitting him in the chest and knocking him off the edge of the catwalk. Yugo's reflexes are quick, his arm shifting into a long, almost spine-like appendage that stretches for the catwalk and buries its pointed tip in the stone. He retracts it, quickly pulling himself back, and capitalizes on his momentum by pointing the booster behind himself and firing down at the water. The force of the blast sends him rocketing at Orochimaru, and Yugo whips his other appendage toward his throat. Orochimaru flies through tiger ox dog rabbit snake, takes a deep breath in, and breathes out a whirlwind powerful enough to send Yugo flying end over end across the room. He slams back first into the opposite wall, the stone cracking with the impact. His head smacks against the stone and his body goes limp, his limbs shifting back to normal and the dark patches of his skin receding. Sakura's breath hitches on a gasp. Suijitsu quickly looks between her and Yugo before pushing off her chest and rolling out of her arms, falling down toward the water. He only has a second to hear Sakura shout, "What the fuck are you?" and call back his own, "Don't worry about me, get high." Before he hits the water, he liquefies and spins his chakra down through the water, then pulls it all back up into a massive water spout. He whirls across the surface of the reservoir, breaking clean through the pillars in his way. The moment he comes close to the catwalk, he releases his grip, the water losing its shape and collapsing directly on top of Orochimaru. The force knocks the old snake off the water pump and back down to what remains of the catwalk. Suijitsu is thrown from the water spout directly at Orochimaru. The katana and wakizashi are long gone, lost to the depths of the reservoir, but when Suijitsu can't find a sword, he can always make one. He shifts his right arm into a watery blade and plunges down toward Orochimaru, stabbing for his throat. Orochimaru dodges a second too soon for Suijitsu to hit his target, but too late for him to miss entirely. He knocks Orochimaru to the ground, the water blade burying itself in the stone next to his head. He doesn't have time to pull it out and try again. Orochimaru's hand shoots up and buries itself in Suijitsu's liquid arm. Lightning flares to life around Orochimaru's hand and burns through Suijitsu's body, forcing another cry out of him and rattling his body like he's stuck in a pachinko machine. Orochimaru pushes against Suijitsu, forcing him back and bringing himself up. He keeps his lightning-coated hand buried deep in his arm, grin growing all the wider as Suijitsu starts to lose his solid form and shift into something almost gelatinous. The second before Suijitsu's vision can white out for a second time, there's another roar and a blast of compressed air hits Orochimaru in the side. He goes whirling off of Suijitsu, bouncing and rolling along the catwalk and skidding to a halt near the edge. Suijitsu pulls himself up to one knee, just in time for Yugo to step in between him and Orochimaru. Yugo gnashes his teeth and snarls, "Nobody kills the wet one but me." Suijitsu pulls more of himself together, chuckling weakly through his teeth, "At least you didn't call me the moist one." Orochimaru leaps to his feet just in time for Sakura to come flying down from the ceiling. He meets her in the air with a kunao. The image of Sakura immediately bursts into petals and another comes falling down on the other side to replace her. Another kunao, another burst of petals, and in an instant the chamber is full of Sakuras. Each one Orochimaru hits bursts into petals, dissolves into water, explodes in a puff of white smoke, or melts into mud. There are almost more petals in the air than oxygen molecules at this rate. Orochimaru snarls something under his breath and, with a flick of his wrist, Kusanagi comes flying down from the ceiling to cover his back, slicing through the clones and petal illusions harrying him from behind. Deep within the cloud of petals, within the crowd of identical Sakuras, Suijitsu picks out one that isn't just running at Orochimaru like it has a death wish. She's running through hand signs, and it's a fucking long sequence for being in the middle of the fight. What even is she? Ram, tiger, snake, dog, rat, ox, horse, rabbit, tiger, boar, snake? What jutsu even is? A practice brick wall bursts up from the ground directly in front of Orochimaru and smacks right into his chin. You could hear the sound of his teeth clacking together all the way up on the surface. His eyes go out of focus and he staggers to one side. Kusanagi immediately falls out of the air, landing with a clatter on the stone ground. Oh fuck. Oh fuck. Oh fuck, now's his chance. Suijitsu leaps into a sprint. His vision tunnels, the world narrowing down to a single point, Kusanagi. He drops into a roll a foot away from it, grabbing it off the ground mid-roll and coming back up into a drifting run. Orochimaru's back is turned. He's focused on Sakura. Now. Now. Suijitsu shoves all the chakra he has left down into his legs and fires himself like an arrow from a bow at Orochimaru. He thrusts Kusanagi out and up, piercing through Orochimaru's chest from behind and not stopping until the hilt hits his back. Orochimaru goes still. His body sags, the strength leaving his legs. Kusanagi through his chest is the only thing keeping him upright. Suijitsu can't believe it's over. He can't. He won't. And he's right not to. Orochimaru's torso bulges and ripples until the flesh splits. The body explodes, forcing Suijitsu to cover his eyes to keep the blood out of them. There's a massive, meaty thump and a hiss that overpowers Sakura and Yugo's horrified gasps. Suijitsu brings his arm down and his stomach lurches. The thing looming over them now. It has to be Orochimaru, but its body is a writhing mass of white snakes, hundreds of scales rasping against each other to create a sound like television static. It's easily twice the size of Orochimaru. How the hell that thing was hiding inside his body is a question Suijutsu doesn't want answered. Its head almost looks human, with shaggy hair, a pointed chin, scales for skin and several rows of sharp teeth. It can't be Orochimaru. It can't. But its eyes are bright, burning gold, and glaring down at the three of them with nothing but contempt. Suijutsu sees those eyes in his nightmares. There's no one else it can be. He shifts a foot back towards the reservoir. Did you get the signal yet? Sakura slowly shakes her head. I didn't. Suijutsu's pulse jumps, and his voice comes out in a yelp. So? What's the plan? Sakura stares at the creature for a heartbeat longer before she cries out, scatter. She doesn't need to tell him twice. Suijutsu steps backward off the catwalk and is liquid before he hits the reservoir's surface. He races through the water, into one of the intact pipes, and is gone. The moon is at its zenith, and Gaara has been flipping through the same 3 pages of this 50-page report for the past 10 minutes. His desk is stacked high with documents, many more urgent and more deserving of his attention, but something about Yura's report on village security just wouldn't let him put it down. All his proposals in the council chambers and the measures Gaara had seen in practice had seemed both reasonable and prudent. The nagging sense of unease had seemed to have no origin. If he were anyone else, if these measures were being reported by anyone else, Gaara would have chalked it up to nerves. After all, these security measures are only necessary because the Akatsuki are targeting him. Specifically. That would be enough to make anyone paranoid. But Gaara is still the Sand Village's captive monster. Yura is still a man who speaks his name to his face and spits it behind his back. Of course his security measures would seem reasonable and prudent and entirely in the Kazekige's best interest, but the devil would be in the details. And after reading and rereading this security report in varying amounts of detail on and off throughout the day, Gaara is almost certain he's found that devil. Because for all Yura has fortified the village walls, for all he's called back skilled jonin, for all he's kept genin on domestic DNC ranks to consolidate manpower, there is one hole. No one is watching the sky. There are a few sentries within the village's walls keeping an eye out, and they do have ballistæ on the walls and the taller buildings, but they aren't nearly enough. Not for the land of wind. Not for a country of wide open desert and wider skies. Their Nightjar Corps, the Fan Corps, and the Falconer Corps are scattered, the bulk of their manpower on assignments outside the village. Yura in his report chalks this up to assignments made before they learned of the Akatsuki. Unlikely at best, untrue at worst. Incredibly convenient, regardless Tamari is out of the village. As their puppeteers and saboteurs belong to Kankuro, the airborne divisions are Tamari's children. When she's here, she has the final say over where they go and what they do. She would never leave the sky unprotected, especially not the sky above the village. She better than anyone would know how easy it could be to invade the village from above. A darting white spot in the corner of his vision draws Gaara's eye to the window. Flying over the rooftops of the sand village, stark white in the light of the full moon, is a bird. An absolutely massive bird. The only birds he's seen that match it are Falconer Corps summons, but not one of those birds is as white as the driven snow, white enough to glow under the light of the moon. It flies strangely, its movements too smooth, too perfect. Like the Platonic ideal of a bird. There are no birds like that one in this desert. Gaara stands from his desk and immediately doffs his Kaze cage robes to reveal the combat fatigues beneath. He straps his gourd to his back and makes for the roof to confront the intruder. Once he's done, Yura has some explaining to do. Chapter 4, 3. It's midnight, and Sasuke has been pacing in circles for at least 2 minutes. Naruto, from his seat on the ground with his back leaning against a tree, grouses, "You're gonna kill all that grass, you know." Sasuke's eyes slam shut and sparks dance across his fingers as he snaps, "For the love of Naruto, we need a strategy. If you're not gonna say anything helpful, just be quiet." Naruto rolls his eyes, "Well, good luck, because I've used up all my good ideas. I mean, besides maybe threatening to spoil the Ika Ika book I gave him. That might make him close his eyes and cover his ears or something." Sasuke pinches the bridge of his nose. I don't think there are enough hours in the day for me to explain how stupid an idea that is. Yeah, dude, that was the joke, Naruto shoots back, you really think I'm that dumb? Sasuke's mouth quickly opens and shuts. They both know what he was going to say. Naruto just narrows his eyes in a glare and Sasuke looks away. The night is quiet and still, the air between them stifling. Sasuke runs a hand through his hair with an exasperated breath through his nose. This is just frustrating. I know if we were going up against him in a straight fight we could probably take him out, but... Naruto lets his head drop back against the trunk and groans, no, we have to get those stupid bells. He glares at what he can see of the night sky through the trees. At least this isn't going as bad as their first attempt at the test. All he had was confidence, with next to no skill to back it up. Sasuke had skill and confidence but no practical experience in battle. And Sakura? Well, Sakura had contributed about as much as she's contributing right now. At least now they don't have to worry about who's going to be sent back to the academy because they couldn't get their hands on a bell. Naruto's brow slowly furrows, and he wonders aloud, wait a minute, why do we have to get those stupid bells? Sasuke rolls his eyes, it's a lesson in teamwork. Naruto cuts him off, well yeah, we learned that the hard way, but think about it. Back when we took this test the first time Kakashi was trying to hammer home that you have to put your teammates first, right? Like that's why there were 2 bells but 3 of us, and all that drama about you guys not being allowed to feed me so you'd be forced to show if you cared more about the rules than your teammates. The test is made to test teams of 3. But there's only 2 of us, and it's basically the same. Sasuke perks up, a hand going to his chin, it's actually easier. 2 bells, 2 of us. We were allowed to eat before the test, and there's no soft time limit halfway through where anyone without a bell is forced to miss lunch. Why wouldn't they tweak the test to suit 2 people or put additional handicaps on us? Like this, it might as well just be a combat test with an extra hurdle. Naruto frowns hard at the dirt as he turns the question over in his head. That's true on paper, but if it's really as easy as Sasuke's saying, they should have gotten those bells hours ago. At their best, he and Sasuke used to have an unspoken rhythm when they fought together. Naruto only needed a glance at where Sasuke was on the battlefield to know where to go and what to do. And there have been moments during this test where everything clicks into place and it's like their last fight together was yesterday instead of 2 years ago. But the rest of the time, it's like they're trying to dance to 2 different songs. Worse still, Naruto's dancing to a song Sasuke forgot, and Sasuke's performing an elaborate routine he practiced with another partner. And neither of them are all that great at communicating off the battlefield, so they're even worse on it. How many times have they silently agreed not to talk about something in the last 24 hours? It feels like at least 50. Why does their worst shared habit have to be the thing that's survived 2 years of separation and countless instances of that exact thing blowing up in their faces? He thought things would get better after that fight when they were trying to convince Tsunade to come back to the village, but nearly killing each other apparently isn't enough. Naruto's eyes go wide. That's what they're testing for. It has to be. Kakashi, Tsunade, Shizen, Jiraiya, they all know this is what happens when he and Sasuke are pushed to their limit. But, they could still be pushing harder. It would be even easier for him and Sasuke to lose focus on Kakashi and start fighting each other if they were hungry and fighting under harsher conditions. Jiraiya never went easy on him during these past 2 years. Tsunade never goes easy on anyone. But Tsunade said the test was of Kakashi's design. Kakashi, whose soft spot for his students has always been a bigger blind spot than the eye he keeps covered. Who's been living with his favorite pupil for 2 years. Who signed the 3 of them up for a test even Naruto can admit, in hindsight, they probably should have waited another 6 months for because he was sure they were ready for it. He wants them to pass. He's setting them up for success, but not just handing it to them. It's brilliant. And it's exploitable. Naruto's face splits into a mischievous grin, I've got a plan. Sasuke arches a brow, but is down on his haunches, whispering, all right, let's hear it, in an instant. Naruto tells him the plan. Sasuke stares at him for a long moment, then chuckles through his teeth, you really are the #1, unpredictable, knucklehead ninja. I'm in. Sakura has to imagine this is what Orochimaru's lab rats in his horrifying mazes feel like as she flies around a corner, the sound of ivory snakes slithering over and around each other dogging her trail. She compulsively drops petal illusions in her wake, the illusions zipping along her previous course while she wheels down a hallway or cuts through a room. She's starting to lose track of what floor she's on, what direction she's going, if the snakes are even still after her. A bad sign. A really bad sign. A sign she's been in this cursed form too long. She has to end this and end it fast, but how does she fight that thing? She'd suspected that something more monstrous lurked beneath Orochimaru's skin, but nothing like this, nothing on this scale. Maybe the plan can still work, but she still doesn't know. The combination of a pipe bursting above her head and stomping footsteps from around the next bend in the hall make Sakura move on instinct. She yelps out a foul word and has Senbon between her fingers in the blink of an eye, throwing them twice as fast. Two fly harmlessly through water and the other two hit metallic flesh formed into an axe-like blade. See in goddamn fucking sky, Sakura, Suijutsu snarls, body pulling together from the jet of water still spraying from the pipe, watch where you're pointing those things. Sakura stares ahead, slowing her wing beats and dropping back to her feet. It certainly looks like Suijutsu and Yugo are standing in front of her, Kusanagi still firmly in Suijutsu's grip and Yugo slowly getting drenched thanks to Suijutsu's dramatic entrance. But she knows better than anyone how treacherous images can be. She draws two more Senbon from her obi and points them at the boys, voice shaking as she snaps, the password. Now. Every word of it. Suijutsu and Yugo slowly exchange glances before both look up and away, mumbling such elegant recitations as fucking. We thrive in, something. And, there's, the word gate in there. Suijutsu slaps a hand to his forehead as he groans, of course I don't fucking remember it. Yugo grits his teeth tight before roaring, enough. We should be killing Orochimaru. Cutting up every last one of those snakes until this whole base is painted scarlet. Yugo swings the axe replacing his severed hand at Sakura and Suijutsu effortlessly brings Kusanagi up to parry, knocking it away. The axe blade buries itself in the wall a foot above her head. Sakura can't help a smirk. Just as she thought, there's no way either of them would have the patience for that password. She'll need to thank Sasuke one day for inadvertently teaching her that trick during the second exam. Okay, she breathes, stowing her Senbon, you're definitely the real thing. Now, it's obvious that we're not in a great spot right now. Fuck yeah we're not, Suijutsu cuts in, did you even know that he did that to himself? What the fuck did he even how the hell do you replace your whole body with snakes? Sakura shakes her head, no idea, but we have to work with what we're given. Screw that, we need to get out of here, Suijutsu fires back, we don't stand a chance against that thing, we need to regroup and try again later. Yugo saves Sakura the trouble of voicing her own thoughts, no. We gotta kill him now. I'm not gonna rest until I've torn him to pieces. Sakura takes a breath, then adds, speaking from practicality, if we ran, that just gives Orochimaru time to rally his forces and send them after us. And our plan can still work, but that's going to depend on Zayden and Kabuto. Speaking from experience, relying on Kabuto's always a fucking trap, Suijutsu spits, and relying on Zayden was your biggest mistake back in the Earth Country Mountains. Face it, Sakura, we gotta fall back on plans B through literally anything else, because plan A's fucked 6 ways from Sunday. Sakura's voice comes out in a growl, trust me, you don't want to be a part of plan B. A puff of white smoke bursts into being above Sakura's head. A snake, a delicate little garter with pale green stripes breaking up her black body, falls from the cloud. Sakura catches her out of the air as Suijutsu brandishes Kusanagi and Yugo makes ready to swing. The little snake winds tight around Sakura's wrist and whispers, Mistress Sakura, I am Master Kabuto has sent me here with a message. He says, the coop is empty and the traps are set for the fox. Sakura's mouth goes dry, and she rasps with a sandpaper tongue, I see. Thank you, Nino. You're free to return to Ryokai Cave. She quickly does, disappearing as abruptly as she appeared. Sakura's hand slowly curls into a tight fist. She looks Suijutsu and Yugo in the eye and orders, go. Get topside as fast as you can. Suijutsu purses his lips, running a hand through damp hair. You're really staying down here, huh? Sakura shrugs a shoulder. Someone has to light the fuses. Yugo points a clawed finger at her throat and snarls, if you don't make it out of here, I'm going to dig you up and tear your corpse to shreds. Sakura's laugh is weak and breathless. I would expect nothing less. The two boys turn and start sprinting away, both sparing her a lingering glance over their shoulders before they disappear from sight. The sight of them looking back at her in guarded, cautious concern makes something in her gut twist. She closes her eyes and shoves a hard breath out through her nose. She lets her wings pick her up off the ground and shoots off down the corridor. It's time to get back to work. Kakashi watches from a safe distance as Sasuke and Naruto chase after a clone, keeping pace with them as quietly as he can. A shinobi has to carefully weigh speed versus stealth, and right now the boys are forcing him to err on the side of speed. Even after hours of fierce battle they're still putting him through his paces. That, at least, is a good sign. Now, if only they could actually get their hands on a bell. Naruto and Sasuke force the clone out into the open, cornering it between the three posts and the memorial stone. The two of them leap into action, engaging the clone in another tense taijutsu bout. Kakashi's eyes narrow, focusing on Sasuke and Naruto. They're starting to get sloppy. Sasuke's taking as many hits as he lands, and what few signs there are that Naruto's not just acting on feral instinct are ebbing away in favor of more cheap shots and wild swings. Worse than that, their performance back at the river seemed to be a preview of coming attractions, because now they're tripping over each other's feet and getting in each other's way instead of seamlessly fighting in sync. Kakashi bites the inside of his cheek. Damn it. A long night of fighting can grind anyone down, he supposes, but this is concerning. A lucky palm thrust from Sasuke disperses the clone, prompting Naruto to throw his head back and groan, come on. We wasted all this time on a clone. What good is that Sharingan if you can't tell a clone from the real thing? Sasuke shoots a piercing glare over his shoulder at Naruto. I'm not going to explain how this works for the 100th time. Get your head out of your ass and back in the game. Oh, you're telling me to get my head out of my ass? That's fucking rich. Naruto scoffs. You haven't changed a bit, you know that. Sasuke rolls his eyes, adjusting his gloves. Pot, meat kettle. I don't know why I expected you to do any growing up when you spent the last 2 years with a man-child and a bunch of frogs. Kakashi drags a hand down his face, stifling a sigh. This was coming sooner or later, he supposes. Nothing for it but to wait and see if they've matured enough to solve this themselves. Naruto takes Sasuke by the shoulder and forcefully turns him around, getting up in his face and growling, hey. Do not talk shit about Jiraiya. Sasuke doesn't even flinch, just sneering, oh, so you're allowed to talk merciless shit about both of my teachers, but I can't speak the truth about yours. I see how it is. Naruto bares his teeth in a snarl, it doesn't matter how much training I do, does it? You still think you're better than me, you stuck-up jackass. Sasuke lifts his chin, literally looking down his nose at Naruto, I know I'm still better than you. Those 2 years away were a waste of your time. You were dead last before you left, you're dead last now. Naruto's grip tightens on Sasuke's shoulder, his claws digging into his skin, call me dead last one more time. Come on. I fucking dare you. Kakashi squeezes his eyes shut and mutters, Sasuke, don't. He opens his eyes to see Sasuke lean in and spit, dead. Fucking. Last. God damn it. That's it. Naruto rears back and slashes for Sasuke's eyes. Sasuke throws a punch at Naruto's throat. Neither connect. Kakashi bursts out of the trees and is between them in the blink of an eye, effortlessly catching Naruto's wrist and Sasuke's fist. That is enough, Kakashi snaps, you've shown me all I need to see. I'm disappointed in both of you, but I'm especially disappointed in you, Sasuke. I thought we were past this. Whatever he was about to say next dies in his throat when he notices the smirk spreading across Sasuke's face. Kakashi's eyes flicker over to Naruto and find an identical smirk. Both of their bodies start to undulate, rippling, and twisting and bulging unnaturally. Kakashi doesn't get a moment to brace himself before Naruto and Sasuke explode, their skin bursting like water balloons, but it isn't water that comes bursting out of them. It's frogs. and slugs. Dozens and dozens of frogs and slugs, each the size of Kakashi's fist. Kakashi can't help the undignified yelp that comes sprinting up and out of his mouth. The frogs come surging up his right arm and the slugs ooze up his left, both moving far quicker than natural and with absolutely too much purpose. Sticky, slimy, wriggling forms cover his eyes and ears. He can feel the mucus oozing into his ears, spreading across his skin, seeping through his mask and getting into his mouth. The slug slime from the many tiny Katsuya fragments tingles as it spreads across his skin, everywhere it touches quickly going numb. It's like being submerged in mud. Mud that's alive. Before he can come up with a strategy to get the horrible slimy things off, one of the slugs wriggles its way beneath the edge of his mask. Oh God, it's going for his mouth. Kakashi loses the last threads of his composure. With a high-pitched shriek, he collapses to the ground, everything going dark. There's no hiding from Orochimaru. Not now. Not anymore. This is his domain. And in this form, with his body split into dozens of snakes, he chases down all of Sakura's clever little clones and illusions at once. In this form, he can feel the vibrations of her wings as they bounce off the tunnel walls. He can smell her fear, and the chakra she's using to cover it. Oh, if only he could savor this chase. If only he could play with his food a little longer before he had to swallow it whole. But Sakura is moving with purpose. He has to end this, and end it now. He chases down her doppelgangers and shields, bursting and dispersing them all, forcing Sakura to move the way he wants her to. He chases her up from the third layer, down from the first, and out of all the little nooks and crannies in the second layer. He cuts off hallway after hallway, forcing her to make sharp turns, somersault through the air, dip and dive and twirl out of his reach. He'll run her until her wings can't keep her aloft anymore. He cackles though his many mouths, fly away home, little flower, fly fly fly. He finally corners her, two pieces of his body chasing her toward one of the support pillars holding up the second layer's ceiling before coming together again. And like any cornered rat, Sakura has no choice but to bite the cat. Sakura whirls around in midair, hands flashing through signs before she brings them up to her mouth and takes a deep breath. She spits out a storm of little flames, each no larger than the pad of a thumb. Orochimaru's body parts around the flames, the beads of fire going straight through him and hitting the support pillar. Sakura zips through the air, flying in zigs and zags just out of his reach, faking left and flying right as he lashes out for her with his jaws. A cluster of snakes break off from the hole, slithering up along the wall and launching off it to hit Sakura's right flank. The impact kills her momentum, allowing Orochimaru's body to surge up and absorb the piece back into the hole. His body constricts around her, squeezing down until Sakura's gray skin starts to turn red. Her eyes keep darting up to the top of the support pillar as she struggles. Orochimaru follows her gaze. Hidden in the darkness, marked only by a spark moving rapidly towards it, is a satchel tied by cord to where the pillar meets the ceiling. A rope, a quickly burning rope, is sticking out of the top of the satchel. It's a satchel charge, filled to bursting with black powder. She must have lit it with that fire jutsu she threw at him before. Something cold and sharp jolts through his heart. He turns his glare back to Sakura and hisses, "Where are the others?" Sakura forces a grin and just replies, "Where do you think?" There's a muffled boom. The ground beneath them rocks and shakes. Orochimaru doesn't have time to catch his balance when there's another boom, this one rocking the base hard enough to knock stalactites off the ceiling. The shock of the explosions breaks his grip on Sakura, letting her dart up toward the ceiling. She doesn't even need hand signs for hidden mole jutsu anymore, earth chakra simply pulsing off her in a wave of green and the stone immediately yielding to her touch. She bores a hole straight up, and before Orochimaru can follow, the satchel charge explodes in a blast of fire and force. The pillar crumbles and the ceiling goes with it, caving in on top of him. He's too slow to disperse his snakes, two large chunks of stone landing directly on him before he can. One hits his skull, forcing an eye shut, and the other his back, breaking dozens of serpentine spines. He works through the pain, splitting the living components of his body and slithering up through the rubble. He needs earth chakra and covers himself in it, grinding the broken rock around him into fine sand. Even split up like this, he doesn't move as fast as he'd like, and the instant he makes it to the first layer of the hideout is the instant the ceiling comes crashing down with the force of yet another explosion. Orochimaru avoids the worst of it this time around, quickly retreating back into the tunnel he'd carved for himself. Dozens of ceiling fragments come raining down into the tunnel, battering him like 1,000 tiny fists. He grits his teeth and keeps digging, forcing himself ever upward. Even when it's falling to pieces around him, everything he built, everything he ever made, it's slipping through his fingers, literally crumbling to dust. Orochimaru knows his base better than anyone else. He knows he's almost at the surface. He pulls his body together, using the full strength of this massive form to make the final push to the surface. He just needs to keep going, keep moving. He's going to breach the surface in 3, 2, 1. He breaks through the ground into bright moonlight. And fire. Pain explodes across his left flank, fire and smoke filling his vision. All Orochimaru can smell is sulfur and blood. The rapid concussive blasts are forcing him to the right, but he uses all his strength to turn his head toward the source of his pain. Civilians. There's a rabble of skinny and filthy civilians, each and every one of them firing mortars, rifles, cannons, and all manner of artillery weapons directly at him. They're in a tight formation of staggered rows, and at the back are the last of Sakura's accomplices. Huo Zayden, the powder monger, has crawled out of his hole in no man's land to play commander. Orochimaru can hear him shouting orders to the rabble, giving nonverbal signals with his one remaining arm. When the front line runs out of ammunition, he directs the line just behind them to move forward and keep up the pressure. And in the very back, calm despite the storm raging around him, is Kabuto. He stands with one hand on his hip and the other giving silent commands to the newly freed prisoners. They rush on and off of a pair of sturdy wagons, rolling barrels of black powder to the peasants to reload their weapons. Orochimaru grits his rows and rows of teeth. He can handle the pain. He needs to handle the pain for just a little longer. Just long enough for this trump card to turn on them. The more shots they land, the more of his blood comes bursting out, only to evaporate. Orochimaru's eyes zero in on the center of the front line, where an older woman with a scar on her temple suddenly seizes up. Her jaw locks, her fingers close around her rifle, and in an instant she's all but frozen. The two peasants on either side of her quickly follow suit, and the ranks around them start to shift and burble with shock at the hole in their bombardment. Zayden's eyes go wide and he shouts to Kabuto, "What the hell is he doing?" Kabuto's brow furrows as he calls back, his blood in this form vaporizes on contact with the air. "Fall back, if you breathe it in you'll be paralyzed." The civilians and prisoners follow his order, but they're not soldiers. They weren't trained in how to fight and retreat at the same time. There's an opening in their offensive line, one Orochimaru races straight for. He's going to break their formation clean in half. Wherever Sakura is, the sacrifice of these innocents she dragged into battle against him will definitely ferret her out. A feral roar sounds from behind one of the black powder carts. The cart jerks, jostles, and lifts off the ground. Orochimaru only catches a glimpse of Yugo, holding the whole cart up, an arm transfigured to be twice as muscular and covered in vents, before he throws the whole thing directly at him. Kabuto reaches into his weapon pouch and flings a kunai with an explosive tag attached to it on the cart's heels. The cart full of black powder barrels smashes into Orochimaru. The kunai hits the cart, the explosive tag going off and starting a chain reaction through the black powder barrels. The explosion is bright enough to blind. Orochimaru can't rely on his discipline and training anymore, letting loose a howl that sounds over the explosion. There's a silver lining, if only for a moment. The force of the explosion sends wooden shrapnel flying all across the battlefield, digging into the flesh of the unarmored civilians and knocking them to the ground. Yet more of his blood vaporizes in the air, blowing on the force of the blast to paralyze all but the back line. The moment passes when Suijutsu comes sprinting through the battlefield, a scrap torn from his shirt hastily tied around the bottom of his face. He skids to a halt at the front line, making hand signs with one hand and brandishing kusanagi with the other. The blade glows with foreign blue chakra. Suijutsu takes the hilt in both hands, and swings. What comes from the blade is a massive wave, following the trajectory of Suijutsu's swing. The wave crashes into Orochimaru, knocking him back from the front line and stealing back all the distance he gained. Suijutsu raises Kusanaga's blade straight up, the moonlight glinting off the steel. Sakura shoots up from behind the remaining cart, flying higher and higher until she's yards above Orochimaru. She points a finger directly at his head and pulls back with her other arm, green chakra forming into a bow and an arrow with flower petals for fletchings. She lets the arrow loose with a fierce cry of, "Hama ya!" Time seems to slow as Orochimaru watches the arrow fly for him. He sees Sakura's gray skin, white hair, and delicate wings all recede. Her eyes roll back, and she immediately starts plummeting to the ground. As the arrow comes closer, within the blaze of chakra Orochimaru can see a sharp, dark branch with delicate pink flowers blooming at its end. He lets his eyes slide shut an instant before the arrow pierces his mouth. And everything goes dark. Kakashi is brought back to the world by the sound of jingling bells. He pries his eyes open. Naruto and Sasuke are standing over him, each with a bell in hand and a slimy creature perched on their shoulder. Both of them are wearing insufferable smirks, but he can't say they don't deserve to feel smug right now. He eases himself up into a sitting position, pulling his headband back down over his Sharingan and smiling wearily behind his mask. "All right," he sighs, "you got me. That was an impressively dirty trick." Which part, Sasuke wonders, the frog and slug clones, or the fake fight? "Personally I'm proud of the clones," Naruto remarks, puffing out his chest, "some of my best work yet, believe it." The toad on his shoulder lets out a loud croak, as if it agrees. The small Katsuyu on Sasuke's shoulder seems to find the act of slowly crawling into his hair much more interesting than their conversation. Kakashi shivers as the cool breeze hits just a bit colder, what with all the toad and slug slime covering his skin and soaking into his clothes. "The fake fight," Kakashi replies, running a hand through his slightly sticky hair, "you're both far better actors than I gave you credit for. With a little more polish, you two could be scary." Naruto and Sasuke trade grins and bump fists. A dull, warm ache throbs through Kakashi's chest. They really are growing up right before his eyes. Was it really only 2, nearly 3, years ago that Naruto had been tied up to the very posts he's standing in front of, with Sasuke offering him his lunch and making excuses for it? A part of him, not as tiny nor as distant as Kakashi pretends, can't help but wonder if this could have been him and Obito. A strong showing, a familiar voice cuts in over the sound of crunching undergrowth, but on the downside, "I now owe Jiraiya 100 ryo." All eyes turn to the trees just behind the memorial stone. Tsunade makes her entrance first, Jiraiya a few paces behind, but both are quickly overtaken by Shizune. She sprints over to the boys with an excited squeal and throws her arms around them both. Taunton trots in circles around their feet, oinking merrily. Naruto's eyes go impressively wide and his face impressively red. Sasuke endures Shizune's affection with his usual light flush and subtle smile, bringing an arm up to pat her back. Kakashi pushes up to his feet, shooting Tsunade an amused glance over his shoulder. "What were you betting on?" Jiraiya cracks a smirk, "How long it'd take for them to pass." Tsunade thought it'd go down to the wire. "Well, at least you bet on us almost failing instead of just failing outright," Sasuke snorts, carefully extracting himself from Shizune's embrace. "You said this test would determine our future status. What's the verdict, ma'am?" Tsunade crosses her arms over her chest, lips quirking up in a smile. "I did say that, didn't I? Well then, in light of your performance, Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi, for the foreseeable future the three of you will be taking missions together not as students and teacher, but as a team of shinobi on equal footing. For clarity and because I'm uncreative, your designation will be Team Kakashi." Tsunade shifts her eyes to Naruto, adding, "And for you, mister, the test isn't over. Since Sasuke is an experienced Chunin and Kakashi a seasoned Jonin, you'll be participating in missions of higher stakes and scale than you're used to. Depending on how well you do on these missions, I may be able to get a special dispensation to promote you to Chunin without having to take the exams." Naruto's eyes light up, but Tsunade cuts him off, jabbing a sharp fingernail in his face. "I'd have to go through the council for that, and they're crusty old bastards always trying to find the tiniest flaws in my proposals to argue over for hours. Your work better be so exemplary they can't tell me shit. Don't disappoint me, Uzumaki." Naruto blinks rapidly, but grins wide and folds his arms behind his head and crows, "No sweat. Just you watch, Grandma, I'm gonna blow you away, believe it." The conversation falls into casual small talk about what to do for dinner when 90% of the shops are closed, and Kakashi looks on wistfully. He knows he should be seeing himself out, after all he was just informed he has team registration paperwork to do, but he wants to savor this moment for just a little longer. I hope you'd be proud of them, Kakashi murmurs to all the people who aren't here, but should be. Sakura is brought back to the world by Yugo softly jostling her and whispering her name. She curls closer to the heavy, solid warmth at her side. She can feel her hands shaking, and is just so cold. But she has to get up. People are counting on her. Opening her eyes feels like trying to pull a pair of magnets apart. When she finally gets them as open as they're going to get, she takes blurry stock of her surroundings. She can see the edges of trees framing the night sky and the not quite full moon. She can see Yugo, directly above her. From the angle, she has to imagine she's being cradled in his arms. It takes her longer than she'd like to remember why that would be. He has to have caught her, right after she fell out of the sky. He's reverted back to his normal state and his eyes, 2 parts concerned 1 part odd, keep flickering between her and something just past her. The rest of her allies are nearby. Suigetsu and Zayden are the closest, Suigetsu kneeling at Yugo's side and Zayden standing over him. Suigetsu and Zayden are close to her, close enough to touch, but their eyes are stuck on something just to her left. Suigetsu's jaw is on the floor as he looks at whatever it is, the moon caught in his big purple eyes. Zayden is no less transfixed by whatever it is they're looking at, but seems less awed, more disturbed. His one hand keeps rubbing at his beard, covering his mouth. Kabuto is a few steps removed from the 4 of them. Sakura cranes her neck just a bit to see him injecting something from a syringe into one of the civilians, a young man. The young man being injected had been stock still, but suddenly takes a deep breath, and sags forward when Kabuto removes the needle. Sakura's brow furrows for a moment, before Kabuto shouting something about a paralytic poison shuffles back into her mind. Kabuto picks himself up and starts to move deeper into the crowd, but pauses to look over his shoulder. Not at her, but at whatever is just to her left. His eyes are unreadable, as always. A civilian woman with cropped brown hair and a scar on her temple comes over to the young man Kabuto just treated, squeezing his shoulder and whispering to him. Sakura struggles with her name for a few moments before the memory of her, concussed but alive in a tavern in a tiny rice farming village, comes staggering back to her. Tang Sanha, from Tadami. Sakura had saved her life, and she'd gone on to stoke more and more revolutionary fires across the land of sound. Sakura owes her more than just a thank you for all this manpower. What she's going to have to pay her. She doesn't know where she stands on it yet. But it's too late to back out now. Sanha also can't help stealing glances over her shoulder at whatever is on Sakura's left, eyes widening every time she does. Sakura licks her chapped lips, trying to puzzle out what they're looking at. From what she remembers of the battle, the hideout, or what was the hideout, should be that way. As should Orochimaru's corpse. She can't imagine that's very pretty, and even trying to picture it makes a strange bolt of pain lance down the back of her throat. No, she can't think about that. She has to think about what's necessary, what's right in front of her. Sakura shifts in Yugo's arms, trying to sit up. I'm awake, Yugo. How is everyone? Is anyone injured? Yugo frowns down at her. Sakura. We should get everyone packed up and ready to move. We can't stay here long. We should also take stock of how much powder we used, see how much we owe Zayden. Sakura. Right, shit, I should be. How are you, Yugo? Orochimaru took your arm off, is that still a problem with your Kekkei Genkai or? Sakura, Yugo's voice comes out forceful, but not angry, and that's enough to shut Sakura up as he points with the stump of his arm to her left. Look. Sakura swallows hard. She takes a deep breath. She looks. And gasps. Rooted on the edge of the crater that had been the hideout is a cherry tree in full bloom. Twisted up in its gnarled trunk is the body of Orochimaru, bark and branches growing over, around, and through him. The branches of the canopy are all growing up and out from his open mouth, where she'd aimed her arrow. Sakura can only gawk as the petals come drifting down on the night breeze. She whispers, I did that. Yugo nods, you did that. Zayden takes his hand off his mouth, staring down at Sakura. That's wood style, isn't it? Only the first Hokage could do that. Just what the hell are you, Sakura? Sakura gapes at him for a moment, then slowly shakes her head. I know, any ninja who can do earth style and water style and has good chakra control can do this. It just takes more chakra and more of your life force than any ninja can really afford to give up. That shouldn't have worked for me. I've tried that before, but I can only do it when I'm using the curse mark AN, and even if it had worked, what if Yugo didn't catch me? I would've. I'm not anything special, Zayden. I just got, really lucky. Please. You're the least lucky person I've ever met. Sakura's breath hitches and her head whips back to the tree, just in time to see Orochimaru's body start to melt. The flesh comes sloughing off the tree, white snakes falling to the ground as lumps of disfigured meat. The strange, almost puppet-like head plops to the ground in pieces. The flesh starts to dissolve at the edges into chakra and an odd green light. Yugo's hackles rise as it washes over them all. Sakura doesn't have the chakra left to calm him, so she just squeezes his upper arm. The last chunk of flesh falls away from Orochimaru's head, revealing Orochimaru. He's human again, or at least humanoid. The branches of the canopy are sprouting from where his heart should be. Sakura finds herself relaxing by just a fraction. He's still going to die. She didn't mess up. But he's almost as she remembers, but he looks thinner, his face gaunt with deep lines around his eyes and mouth. His hair is thinner too, no longer glossy black but dull and streaked with gray. He looks his age, instead of the nebulous void of, not young, not old, she'd known for the past 2.5 years. Something about that makes Sakura's heart clench tight. His lips twist in a pale shadow of his regular grin. No, you're not lucky. But you're certainly not special, either. I suppose that makes you annoying. Sakura wants to laugh. It comes out choked and weird. It almost sounds like a sob. Her vision's starting to blur again. She hopes she isn't about to pass out. There are things she still needs to do tonight. Orochimaru's head lolls to the side, strands of graying hair drifting over his face like fog. Oh. Don't do that. You won, try to enjoy it. Sakura doesn't know what he means until she rubs at her blurry eyes and her gloves come back wet. Orochimaru gives her one last raspy chuckle. Save your tears, little flower. We'll meet again. Sakura swallows hard, and finally manages to croak, I hope we do. Orochimaru's chuckle tapers off into a long wheeze. His body goes still. Sakura looks up at the blossoms. The branches are quickly going bare, far quicker than even the friliest, most transient of cherry trees. Sakura carefully climbs out of Yugo's arms, limping over to the tree. She pulls a kunai from her weapon pouch and scratches off a small strip of exterior bark. The cambium bark beneath is brown and dry, the mark of a dead tree. Sakura purses her lips. She knew this was too good to be true. She coughs, let's get the wagons packed up and ready to go. Suijutsu, I need to borrow Kusanagi. Yugo, give me a boost. Suijutsu pushes himself up to his feet, a hand going to his hip. What do you need it for? Sakura scans the crowd and meets Sanha's eyes. Sanha crosses her arms over her chest, narrowing her eyes, but not blinking. The terms of their deal won't change, no matter how much Sakura cries. Sakura takes a deep breath, and replies, I need to cut off Orochimaru's head. Takamaru is a good bird. Takamaru is a fast bird. It may be dark and cold, but the humans gave him a message and told him to fly fast to the leaf, and Takamaru is a good bird who always does what he's told. Takamaru flaps his wings as hard as he can, pushing to go quicker than quick, faster than fast, speedier than speed itself. The humans were upset. That means even the fastest bird in sand has to be faster. He is close, he knows he is, when the wind suddenly changes direction and pushes him down instead of forward. Takamaru goes crashing through the branches and into the forest. He doesn't fall for long. A hand catches him out of the air. When it closes around him, the stinging warmth that surrounds his humans pulses through him and forces a squawk from his beak. He wants to thrash and peck and claw, but it's as if he's asleep, but awake, because he can't move even an inch. His heart is beating too fast. He's a good bird. A good bird. He has to move. He has to go to the leaf village. He has to give them the message quickly, or he's not a good bird. It's dark, so dark. He thinks a hand is covering his head. He's scared. He knows what happens when humans catch ninja hawks. They take their messages off their backs, then kill them, and they are bad birds who didn't do their jobs. He's scared. He doesn't want to be a bad bird. He feels a hand take the message off his back. There's a pulse of stinging warmth, faint, but close. Everything is quiet for a terrifying moment, before a flat voice says, "This bird is from sand. The Kaze cage has been kidnapped by the Akatsuki." Another voice, higher, but just as flat, asks, "Will this be detrimental to the operation in the east?" There's another long pause, then the first flat voice replies, "Negative. This will be a serviceable distraction, drawing the Hokage's immediate attention west instead of east. We will have more time to work. Should we delay this bird any further? Hold it for another hour. I'll start back to headquarters and report to Danzo. He should know about this before the Hokage does." There's a brisk shift in the wind, quick and fleeting. Takamaru lies there, still and blind, for what feels like forever. But then the message is returned to its place on his back, and the hand comes off his eyes. In an instant, he can flap his wings, shake his head, snap his beak. Takamaru takes a brief glance at the ninja that held him. Their feathers are black everywhere but their face, which is white and red with two dead black eyes that don't shine right. Takamaru takes off, flying for the leaf village. He will not let those ninja make him slow. He will fly even faster, even harder, and deliver his message. He will not be remembered as a bad bird. Chapter 5, 4. For Team Kakashi's first act as a semi-official unit is to have a sleepover. It's a lot more practical than it sounds. Naruto's apartment may have been kept open for him these last 2 years, but it's also 1 in the morning, and Naruto claims his landlord would take being woken up right now to get the keys very poorly. Combine that with the fact that the place is covered in dust and has no food in it, it's a lot less hassle for Naruto to have a cup of instant ramen at Sasuke and Kakashi's place and crash on the couch. It's just good teamwork. That's how Naruto and Sasuke have found themselves sitting on either side of Kakashi's tiny kitchen table, slurping up ramen Sasuke boiled in broth, transferred from cups to bowls, and added egg, pork, green onion, and nori too. The dogs are all clustered under the table in a snoring pile, bowl acting as a footrest for Naruto. Kakashi is in his bedroom, but thanks to the thin walls Sasuke can hear him scribbling away at their team registration paperwork and swearing at the bureaucratic nonsense. Naruto finishes off a particularly noisy bite and remarks, "I don't know why I didn't think about adding all this stuff to instant ramen myself, this is way better than just eating it as is." Sasuke shrugs and replies, "I mean, I didn't come up with this idea. Shizune came over once, saw me and Kakashi were both eating like crap because no one ever taught us how to cook, and came back the next day with a whole binder of meal plans and shit. She then added, teaching me how to cook, to our training regimen in between teaching me how to make poisons." Naruto's eyes go wide at that last point. Wait, you were learning to cook and make poisons at the same time? Did you?" Sasuke snorts around a wry smirk, "Yes, I did get some things mixed up a few times. Nothing really bad, nobody had to get their stomach pumped, but Kakashi did nearly shit to death, so." Naruto cackles out loud, "Oh my god. He must have been so pissed at you." Sasuke snickers around a bite of ramen, "He knew the risks when he left dinner in my hands." Naruto's laughter tapers off into a thoughtful silence. He's still smiling, but it's a wisp of a thing. His eyes are far away. It's an expression Sasuke hadn't thought Naruto capable of before today. Sasuke's brow furrows as he considers his friend. He doesn't know what to do with this new, secretive, almost shy side of Naruto. The boy he remembers seemed to blurt out every thought in his head as soon as he had it. Wherever this is coming from, whatever it's hiding, Sasuke's pretty sure he can't take too direct an approach if he wants to break it open. He's tried that before with people like Ino and Neji when they're deep in a mood, and the only thing that breaks is his nose. So Sasuke comes at this from the side, "So, how would you rate your first day home?" "Better than expected, worse, what?" Naruto purses his lips, pushing his egg around the ramen. I guess it kinda evens out to average? Like, it was great finally seeing you and Kakashi and everyone again. I can't tell you how much I've missed you guys, and getting to show off some of what I've learned during the bell test was great, and getting put on a team with you guys is awesome. Sasuke arches a brow, but... Naruto lets out a long sigh, but... I know, it feels stupid, Naruto pauses again, frowning tightly down at his food. It doesn't take someone especially skilled in reading people to realize Naruto's deciding what he should and shouldn't say. Sasuke just waits. He can't really force Naruto to say anything he doesn't want to. Well, he could. But injecting your friends with sodium thiopental is generally frowned upon. Naruto looks off toward the window and continues, I knew in my head that I'd be missing a lot, but I guess in my heart I thought when I came back I'd just slot right back into the spot I left behind and things would be normal again. But you guys outrank me, and you've all been working together for 2 years, and... It's dumb. I shouldn't have expected everything to be exactly the same, but I still feel like an outsider when I'm with my friends. Naruto doesn't quite look him in the eye, but he gets close. I thought I made so much progress in making friends and making the village recognize me, but now it feels like all of it got wound back. Like, I think about becoming Hokage, and I just think about how Gaara stuck around his village and managed to become Kazekage while I was off training, and... I wonder if I wasn't off learning the wrong stuff. Sasuke drums his fingers on the tabletop, thinking over his next words carefully. His first instinct is to tell Naruto that he's completely right. It had been a stupid idea for him to leave the village, where all his friends are, where his sensei is, where he would have been perfectly safe. He has been learning the wrong things, because if Sasuke has learned anything over the past 2 years, it's that no amount of strength and skill can make up for understanding the chain of command and how to adapt to new teammates and work with old ones when they're being pains in your ass. He is further away from his goal, because right now Sasuke's better qualified to be Hokage than Naruto is. But even if there's a single kernel of truth in any of those statements, it doesn't change that they're born of bitterness, and that they're just plain mean. His second instinct is to tell Naruto he's being an idiot. Of course there's going to be an adjustment period. He was gone for 2 years. It isn't like he's coming home to people who couldn't care less that he left. Everyone has missed him as much as he's missed them. He has no idea how quiet the village has been without him, how Kiba has gotten louder to fill the silence, how Gaara ends every letter asking if he's heard from Naruto, how Hinata drifts through the streets like a ghost. Everyone has been waiting for him to come back, and they're willing to make more room if he can't fill his old spot. But just telling Naruto all of that won't mean as much as when he actually meets up with everyone again and experiences it. And his third instinct is to tell Naruto that of course everything isn't back to normal yet. Because normal includes Sakura. But, that's not a conversation either of them are ready for. So, with his shitty, petty, bitter, unhelpful instincts out of the way, Sasuke sighs, I get where you're coming from. I mean, I haven't given up on the whole avenge and restore my clan thing, you know. But I'm not out there chasing after Itachi. I'm stronger, sure, but my training's not really designed for assassinating single targets with Sharingan. Like, there will be times when I'm at the hospital, or I'm training with Lee, or I'm looking after the dogs, and I just find myself thinking, what am I doing? How is this helping me avenge the clan? It feels like it's never been further away, honestly. Sasuke forces himself to take a bite of his ramen. It gives him more time to think. Naruto watches him eat, waiting quietly for him to continue. Sasuke swallows, then says, I guess it's the sort of thing that'll stop when Attack is dead. In the meantime, there's this thing Tsunade says to patients when she's prescribing some treatment or medicine they don't like, what's good for us doesn't always feel like the right thing, but you have to trust that it'll help you in the long run. I say it to myself, and I'm gonna say it to you. He looks Naruto in the eye, your skill set is way more diverse than it was before you left, you're making better use of skills you already have and picking up new ones I don't think anyone but Jiraiya would have actually tried to teach you. You are unequivocally a stronger ninja for your time away. As for the rest, well, you just gotta trust that it'll catch up. Naruto's face slowly breaks into one of his trademarked sunny grins, yeah. Thanks, Sasuke. Sasuke can tell there's still more Naruto isn't saying sitting somewhere low and dark. But it's not gonna come up if Naruto doesn't want it to. The time for pushing an emotional vulnerability has clearly passed. So Sasuke cracks a smirk and replies, "Anytime, dumbass." Shikamaru is surprised to find he's missed hearing Naruto miles before he actually sees him. He's a few flights of stairs down from Tsunade's office when he hears Naruto faintly jabbering something about seals being a bitch and a half to paint on my own back. Shikamaru's eyebrow lightly arches and he instantly makes the call that whatever that's about, it's none of his business. Naruto's voice grows closer and closer until he comes around the curve in the hall, Sasuke at his side and Kakashi at his back. Sasuke catches sight of him from the corner of his eye and grins, calling down the hall, "You're up early." Shikamaru smirks and replies, "Someone had to walk to Mary to the gates, and you know how Tsunade gets if you don't report new developments promptly." Naruto perks up and leans closer Sasuke, whispering conspiratorially, "He walked her to the gate?" "Oh, they are definitely." Before Naruto can finish that thought there's a shout from just behind Shikamaru, "Out of the way. Urgent Cipher Core business. Clear a path." And Shikamaru is suddenly catching an elbow to the side, the blow shoving him violently to the right as a young woman with half-finished makeup and short brown hair comes barreling through on his left. She almost gets all the way past Naruto, Sasuke, and Kakashi before glancing over her shoulder, spinning on her heel, and grabbing Sasuke by the elbow. "Sasuke, great timing. I'm gonna need to borrow your Sharingan, hurry up and come with me." She doesn't give Sasuke much choice in the matter. Sasuke's bewildered expression is the last thing Shikamaru sees before he disappears around the bend in the hall. Naruto's eyebrows are nearly up behind his headband as he gawks after his teammate. He looks to Kakashi and asks, "Is Sasuke part of the Cipher Corps too?" Kakashi runs a hand through his hair with a sigh, "No, but as the Hokage's apprentice he spends so much of his time in the tower that everyone here knows who he is and what he can do. And Tsunade doesn't mind loaning him out if it's urgent, so..." Kakashi shoves his hands in his pockets and starts walking back the way they came. "Let's go see what all the ruckus is." Naruto nods and sprints after Sasuke. Shikamaru just watches the former Team 7 dart back down the hall, staying rooted to the spot. Now that definitely is none of his business. Emergencies are the very definition of a drag, and he was looking forward to going back to sleep after reporting in. Still, can't hurt to let Tsunade know she's in for an early morning headache. Shikamaru climbs the rest of the way up to Tsunade's door and raps a loose rhythm on it with the back of his hand. Tsunade's voice is already painted with a tinge of agitation and exhaustion, "Come in." Shikamaru opens the door and begins, "So I've got good news and bad news." Tsunade looks up from her mountain of paperwork with a long-suffering sigh, "Of course you do. You know the drill, good news first." "Good news, Tamari's safely on her way back home," Shikamaru reports, hands going into his pockets. "I saw her to the western gate a half hour ago, because that woman is an ungodly early riser. I'd say that marks my mission of escorting her around as officially complete, wouldn't you?" Tsunade arches an eyebrow and cracks a smirk, "I'd call that going above and beyond the call of duty, especially for your lazy ass. Are you looking for a medal, or am I not the girl you're trying to impress?" Shikamaru pinches the bridge of his nose, "Of course Sasuke's infected you, too. Is that why I keep being assigned to be her escort? Because you're playing matchmaker?" Tsunade snorts out a chuckle, "I have no idea what you're talking about. Now, the bad news." Shikamaru runs a hand through his hair, "Right, that. So, bad news, 3/4 of Team 7 are probably gonna come rushing in here in like 5 minutes with even worse news. They were on their way here when a member of the Cipher Corps came barreling through like a bat out of hell, shouting about urgent business, then she grabbed Sasuke so she could use his Sharingan. If she doesn't think there's time to crack Genjutsu ciphers the old-fashioned way, we've probably got something bad on our hands." Tsunade's brow furrows, "Where were they going?" Shikamaru frowns and replies, "The code breaker was heading east, so probably the aviary." "Why, were you expecting some bad news this morning?" Tsunade drums her long nails on the tabletop, creating a rhythmic clicking sound, "Not exactly. This is none of Shikamaru's business. He's done what he came here to do. Prying leads to trouble and work and the rest of your day going up in smoke. But his mouth is opening before he can stop it and he's asking, What do you mean by that? Tsunade gives him a considering look for a moment, her eyes flickering to the window before she answers, usually, when I get here in the morning this desk is covered in reports from ninja on missions outside the village, those who can take the risk of making reports, anyway. But, she gestures to her desk. Shikamaru scans the documents, skimming their contents. What few mission reports he can find are either domestic, or dated too far back to have come in any earlier than yesterday. The wheels are turning in Shikamaru's mind and he already has a million questions, but the room hasn't been secured, so all he says is, "That's weird." Tsunade nods, very. The door slams open and Suzuki's voice calls over it, "Ma'am, we've got an emergency." Shikamaru gets violently shoved aside for the second time this morning as Suzuki comes storming up to Tsunade's desk, an open scroll in hand and Naruto and Kakashi on his heels. Naruto's eyes are wide and his jaw clenched tight. Kakashi's one dark eye is hard and sharp, but beyond that he's unreadable. Suzuki slaps the scroll down on Tsunade's desk and Shikamaru peers at it over his shoulder. It's written in code, of course, but even though Shikamaru can identify the cipher in seconds and probably break it in a few more, that's not what he's focusing on. For something this urgent, the ink seems too dry. Suzuki's voice draws him back to the present. This came from the sand village on the back of their fastest bird. The Akatsuki infiltrated the sand village and kidnapped Gaara at midnight last night. Shikamaru's blood runs cold. The voices of Suzuki and Tsunade come through in muffled pieces as his mind races, loud and fast as a freight train. Any other details, anything else we can. The ink is too dry. It's absolutely too dry. A message this urgent, a situation this urgent, the longest they would have delayed before sending off their fastest bird has to have been an hour at most. The Akatsuki may have hit the village, may have taken down more than just Gaara on their way in and out, but no amount of chaos or confusion could have kept them from sending a message to their strongest ally for any longer than that. Heading east, towards us, when they left the village. It also says Kankuro went after them, but their fastest bird, that has to be Takamaru. He's asked to Mary about this before, she knows everything about Sand's airborne division, she knows every hawk by name. She said Takamaru's top speed is 30 miles an hour. Sand is 90 miles away. Assuming a delay of an hour between Gaara's kidnapping and this message going out, Takamaru should have arrived somewhere around 4 in the morning. Only two of them, one on a large bird the other walking, but the one on the bird didn't fly ahead of his partner. There's always someone in the aviary for eventualities exactly like this one. Unless someone called in sick last minute, there's no way Takamaru arrived earlier to an empty aviary. Even if he came in while someone was on break, that would only lead to a 5 or 10 minute delay. The Cipher Corps are a branch of the Intelligence Division. Even with all the emergency protocols meant to cut through bureaucratic delays between the two divisions, thanks to the Intelligence Division not running 24/7, there would still be a delay of anywhere between a half hour and an hour between receiving this message and getting it decrypted. It's currently 6 in the morning. Takamaru couldn't have gotten here any earlier than 5. Shikamaru cuts in, this message was delayed. By an hour at least, maybe 2. Everyone shoots him a questioning glance and he runs through the short version of his thought process. As he speaks, Suzuki's grip on the scroll tenses up, threatening to tear the paper. Tsunade starts cracking the knuckles on her left hand, finger by finger. Kakashi's gaze drifts to the window and scans the horizon. Naruto's eyes keep bouncing around, from Shikamaru to Tsunade to his teammates and back to Shikamaru. The weather's too mild this time of year both here and in eastern wind country for a foul wind to have thrown him off, Shikamaru concludes, so all I can think is that this was deliberate. The Akatsuki are the most obvious suspects, but that just begs the question of why they wouldn't just kill the bird and burn the message so no one knows what they're up to. Personally, I'd rule them as too obvious. Kakashi crosses his arms over his chest, that's all incredibly worrying, but the most worrying part is that we don't have time to dwell on that. We have no idea what the Akatsuki actually intend to do with the Jinchuriki, but it's safe to say we don't want to find out. We're racing against time. Tsunade steeples her fingers over her mouth, brows drawn together in thought, yes, we are. Under any other circumstances, I'd have no choice but to send out the first qualified shinobi I see on this mission, but But sending Naruto could be as good as hand-delivering him to the Akatsuki all tied up in a bow. But the last time Sasuke had to choose between taking revenge and saving a Jinchuriki from the Akatsuki, he chose revenge. But the last time Naruto and Sasuke were sent to rescue someone important to them from certain doom, they almost single-handedly fucked the whole mission up and sent her there themselves. Shikamaru looks to Naruto. He keeps starting to speak, but catching himself and biting his tongue. His eyes keep dropping to the floor. No doubt he's remembering everything Shikamaru is, point by point, in agonizing, humiliating detail. Could Naruto handle something like this being his first mission back? Could he handle failing a mission like this a second time? His eyes shift to Sasuke. Sasuke always sits in an odd gray area with his tells, where you know something is on his mind, but never specifically what. Right now his eyes are shut, his head bowed, his lips pursed tight. After a few long heartbeats, Sasuke opens his eyes. "Ma'am, you have the final say. You always do. But just know that I'm not going to let something like Shukuba Town happen ever again." Naruto's eyes go wide as he stares at Sasuke's profile in something like awe. Kakashi looks away to hide the subtle shifting of his mask in a smile. Tsunade holds Sasuke's gaze for a moment. She reaches out and gives his hand a quiet squeeze, one he returns. "Team Kakashi, your first official mission is to provide the Sand Village with aid and support in rescuing the Kaze Cage," Tsunade declares. "Follow their orders and bring the Kaze Cage back alive. You leave at once." Shikamaru pipes back up, adding, "Temari should be on the main road, she wasn't in a rush. If you're quick you can catch up to her." "Good, that's what I'm counting on," Sasuke says, turning on his heel and making for the door. "I have a plan." "You have a plan? Already?" Naruto splutters, scrambling to keep up. "Keep them honest, Kakashi," Tsunade mutters, just before Kakashi's through the threshold. He spares her a masked smirk over one shoulder. "Don't I always?" Kakashi shuts the door behind him. Shikamaru immediately gets to work, hands zooming through the signs for a genjutsu to cloak the inside of the office from prying eyes and ears. Tsunade stands up and makes a circuit of the room. Shikamaru can feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as she sends out pulses of chakra in the hopes that they'll bounce off anyone or anything hidden in plain sight. After a few moments, Tsunade taps her foot on the ground in rhythm, "ILLCLEAR." No other reports have gotten through all morning, but that one does, Shikamaru remarks. "It's still early, there could be mundane reasons for the delay, but it's highly unlikely literally every other shinobi we have in the field all sent their hawks out into bad weather. And it's a hell of a report to let through," Tsunade adds, putting her hands on her hips. "With an allied cage's life in danger I have to make this the priority. I'd call it a perfect ruse if it wasn't something so hard to fake." Shikamaru glares down at the scroll. "Our shadow seems to be getting ambitious." Tsunade arches a brow. "You have a name for them now." Shikamaru nods, "Dogging our every step, working just out of sight, acting shady as all hell toward an end I still can't see. You know I of all people hate to call them this, but shadow fits pretty damn well, doesn't it?" Tsunade looks away with a sigh. "Fair enough. I won't ask you to look into this, but I won't stop you, either. Just be careful." Shikamaru nods as he walks to the door. "You too, Lady Hokage." Shikamaru heads back out into the tower. Great. Now he needs to find Koji and Ino and tell them they've got an unofficial mission to root out village corruption first thing in the morning. What an absolute fucking drag. Temari's not really sure if there's a good time to be waylaid 4 miles into your 90-mile journey home by 2 of your youngest brother's 3 friends so they can tell you he's been kidnapped by a mysterious crime syndicate, but she's sure that 8:15 in the morning is the worst time for it. After years spent being afraid of Gaara, it always comes as a bone-shaking shock when Temari finds herself afraid for him. Gaara's supposed to be an invincible monster with an impenetrable defense and unquenchable thirst for blood. But that Gaara died the day Sakura Harino scarred his face. Now, the Gaara in her mind's eye is all thin wrists, heavy eyelids, and secret smiles quickly hidden behind a hand or a turn of the head. She couldn't give a damn what could happen to the One Tail if the Akatsuki get their hands on it. For all the grief it's given the Sand Village they can take it. But they can't take her brother. They won't. The instant Sasuke finishes detailing the situation, Temari snaps, "We need to get moving. Now. I agree we do, but, Suzuki cuts in, we don't have 3 days to spare. Technically speaking you're in command, Tamari, so you can shoot down anything we suggest. But, if you're willing to listen, I have a plan. Tamari narrows her eyes. Suzuki's plans aren't nearly as reliable as Shikamaru's, that much she knows. But that's an impossible standard to live up to. She gives the kid an apprizing look, scanning him up and down. He's tense, but focused, eyes steadily on her. On either side of him Kakashi and Naruto stand solid. She doesn't know either one of them well, but she can reason that if a Jonin is staying quiet and letting Suzuki take the lead, whatever he's got up his sleeve might have merit. As she's thinking, Naruto chimes in, listen, he went over it with us while we were catching up with you, and it's a little crazy but like it's the kind of crazy that'll work, believe it. Tamari arches a brow, I'm listening. Alright, so first I need to know something, Suzuki begins, reaching over his shoulder to rifle around in his pack. I know Sand has a whole airborne division, and I know you're one of the best wind style users in the village. Is there any way you can use wind style to travel by air? Tamari's other brow hops up to join its twin, yes. In theory I could ride on my summon's back and cut the journey down to half a day. But that requires a lot of chakra to keep a hold of him and keep him on course. And at best he can handle one other passenger. I don't know any way to get us all there in under 3 days. That's fine, Suzuki replies, hand emerging from his pack holding a small potted cactus, not all of us need to get there that fast. He passes the plant to Kakashi, you said the dogs could get Gaara's scent off this. Kakashi holds the plant up to his face. There's a soft glow beneath his mask as he channels chakra into his nose and takes a whiff, sniffing around the plant, the soil, and the pot. After a moment punctuated only by the sound of a human man snuffling at the plant like a hound, Kakashi reports, I'm getting your scent, the pot, the soil, the plant itself, and, there he is. Well, if I can unearth Gaara's scent beneath all of those, the dogs should have no problem. Tamari crosses her arms over her chest, shifting in place as her feet itch to sprint for home. Cut to the chase and tell me where you're going with this. Happy to, now that I'm sure it can work, Suzuki replies, the plan is that you and I fly ahead to Sand to provide immediate aid to the village. Meanwhile, Naruto and Kakashi make their way to Sand on foot with the dogs fanning out around them, looking for Gaara's scent. The Akatsuki were heading east out of Sand. With the dogs looking for Gaara, at best we catch them while they're still in transit, at worst we rule out a search area. Tamari purses her lips, splitting the team is always a gamble, Uchiha. Suzuki crosses his arms over his chest, face set in a determined frown, I'd rather gamble with our lives than Gaara's. Tamari shuts her eyes tight, biting down on the inside of her lower lip. And there's the rub. A safe bet for them is a death sentence for Gaara. Even if the Akatsuki don't kill him in the next 3 days, that's still 3 days of travel they'll have on them by the time they get to the Sand Village, and they'll keep that lead when it's time to turn around and actually pursue them. They already have an 8-hour lead. With Akage's life with her brother's life on the line, they can't afford to do anything less than risk it all. Tamari opens her eyes and stalks up until she's nearly nose to nose with Suzuki, hissing through her teeth, if this blows up in our faces I will make you regret it. You won't have to, Suzuki states, voice clear and steady, summon your weasel. I have one last touch to put on this. Tamari steps back and Suzuki immediately drops to one knee, biting the pad of his thumb hard enough to draw blood. He races through signs and slaps his hands on the dirt. In a puff of smoke a fragment of Katsuyu appears, about the size of a small cat, before immediately splitting into 2 palm-sized Katsuyus. Suzuki picks up one and gingerly buttons her into his jacket pocket before handing the other to Naruto. Keep her close and keep her safe, Suzuki instructs, keeping his eyes locked on Naruto as he flails to find a suitable spot for the slug. She'll act as a method of long-range communication between us. If you find something worthwhile out there, tell her and she'll tell us. Tamari leans on her fan and allows herself the ghost of a smirk, couldn't spring for a radio. Suzuki rolls his eyes, didn't have time to requisition one. Besides, Katsuyu's more reliable over longer distances. She'd better be, Tamari mutters, taking several more steps back and unfurling her fan. She breaks the skin on her own thumb and runs through the motions of summoning, swiping her blood along her fan. Kamatari appears in a swirl of smoke and wind, the horse-sized weasel drifting to the ground and quizzically fixing his one sharp eye on Tamari. Tamari reaches out and strokes behind his ear. There's an emergency. We're going for a ride. Kamatari's eye narrows and he rumbles from deep in his chest, you're sure? She bobs her head in a shallow nod, yeah. It's that bad. She swings one leg over his narrow back and pats the spot just behind her. Sasuke ambles onto the weasel, shifting around as he tries to find the best way to distribute his weight. Once he's found it, he loops his arms around Tamari's midsection. Chakra floods his forearms, turning his grip iron tight. Tamari channels chakra into her arms and legs, affixing herself to Kamatari's back. She leans down until her chin is settled between his ears. Take off. Kamatari shoots off the ground like a bullet from a gun. The wind threatens to tear Tamari's hair out of its four tails, but it holds fast. She grits her teeth as the wind cuts at her cheeks. She tugs hard on Kamatari's fur, making him shift ever so slightly to put him on a direct course for the sand village. Her eyes water and burn, but she can't close them. She won't. Not until her feet touch the ground again. Tamari presses herself flush to Kamatari's back and hunkers down for 11 hours of the wind howling in her ears. A shinobi's most valuable tool is their body. That in and of itself is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. A shinobi stripped of their weapons and gear can still fight so long as they have chakra. A properly trained and sufficiently talented shinobi can be more destructive than a siege engine and isn't restricted to traveling over roads, letting them take quicker, more direct routes. But it's because they rely so much on their body that a shinobi can't afford to run it ragged, even, especially, when a politically important life is on the line. They may be able to take the more direct route, but that's not worth much when they're forced to lose hours of progress resting and recuperating every night. Kakashi can't help but curse that as he and Naruto stop to make camp in a rocky cavern ensconced by cotton trees. They've barely crossed the border of the land of rivers, but the setting sun forced their hand. For one, they've been running for 8 hours straight. He's not sure about Naruto, but Kakashi aches down to his bones and his eye is screaming for him to close it. More importantly, travel by night is risky enough in the land of fire's dense forests, but the land of rivers terrain is difficult, to say the least. Penned in on either side by imposing mountains, the country's interior is an intricate web of gorges, crags, and river valleys, all shaded and hidden by tall trees. In the land of fire, if you're jumping through the canopy in the dark and miss a branch, you just hit the forest floor. In the land of rivers, at best you'll go rolling all the way down a mountainside. At worst, you plummet hundreds of feet into whitewater rapids and they never find your body. The thought makes a shiver run up Kakashi's spine as he lights a modest campfire. The dogs still haven't circled back. He sent them off after Gaara's scent moments after Sasuke and Tamari left. He knows they're faster than him and Naruto by a wide margin. He knows they can see 5 times better in the dark than any human. He knows he trained them to be smart when scouting, to hide when they can, flee when they can't, and only fight when they're cornered. And yet, are you worried? Kakashi blinks rapidly, eye darting to Naruto. He's sitting in a loose ball by the fire, elbows resting on his knees. His lips are pursed as he cautiously looks him over. It dawns on Kakashi that, despite how simple the question is, because Naruto is the one asking, he has no idea how to respond. Shame congeals in his stomach, heavy and dense like mud. Naruto shifts in place, frowning just a bit and letting his gaze drop to the dirt. About the dogs, I mean. I know there's a lot worth worrying about right now, but that's like the closest thing, I guess. Kakashi clears his throat like he's giving himself the Heimlich maneuver and forces himself to speak. Yeah. I suppose no matter how well I train them, I'll always worry. The tiny smile on Naruto's face doesn't reach his eyes, but it's not for lack of trying. Man, you spent so much time talking tough when our team first started out, I can't get over what a big sap you turned out to be. Kakashi arches a brow, fishing a ration out of his flak jacket pocket as he mutters, takes one to know one, I suppose. Kakashi has a feeling that if he was Sasuke, Naruto would have fired back another good-natured insult, maybe thrown something at him, and the tension would take a backseat to banter. As it stands, they lapse into an awkward silence as Kakashi eats behind a volume of Ika Ika and Naruto stares into the fire. After a few tentative nibbles, Kakashi pulls his mask back up and coughs. What about you? You've been out of sorts since Sasuke decoded the message. Worried about Gaara? Naruto flinches slightly as Kakashi's question brings him back to the moment. Yeah. Understandable, Kakashi ventures, I refusing to settle on Naruto's face. He's not just the Kazekage, not to you. The two of you are close, right? Naruto shrugs a shoulder. I mean, close as we can be when we've only talked like 3 times. Well, yes, but you're both Jinchuriki. The two of you share something only 7 other people in the world could possibly understand. Naruto stares into the fire for a long, silent moment. Before clenching his hands into tight fists, he worked his ass off to finally get his village to respect and recognize him. To work that hard, struggle that much, deal with all that heartache and loneliness, only to die or worse right when life's finally getting good. It isn't fair. It's wrong. I'm not gonna let that happen. Kakashi frowns behind his mask. There's a fine line between empathy and projection, and Naruto is balanced on it like a tightrope walker. But he can't really judge, can he? He's been walking that line with Sasuke since they met. And it's as Kakashi's thinking that over that he realizes they've dropped into another awkward silence. He can never find the right thing to say to Naruto, can he? Suppose it just goes to show that the longer you put something off, the harder it becomes. There's a rustle from the undergrowth. Naruto and Kakashi leap to their feet, weapons in hand and eyes trained on the noise's source. They hold their breath until a furry, quadrupedal form breaks through the foliage and lopes into their campsite. The firelight glints off Akino's sunglasses as the ninja hound strolls casually up to them. He settles down and scratches behind his ear with a whiff of, "We caught the scent, boss." Naruto's eyes go wider than the sky and in an instant he's crouched in front of Akino, voice coming out in a frantic rush, "You did? Where? When? How far? What way was it going? Can we still catch him?" Kakashi drops to one knee at Naruto's side, one question at a time. Naruto. Akino, give us the rest of your report. We caught it 15 miles southwest of here, somewhere in the Sand River border range, Akino continues, scouting it left us as certain as we can be that the scent's heading northeast. It's not going all that fast, 2 miles an hour at best. The rest of the pack is working on triangulating the scent, seeing if they can't get more precise info. For now, take a sharp turn south toward the Hidden Valley village and you'll likely intercept it in another 5 hours. If you're quick and they don't veer off course, anyway. And if neither of us falls to our deaths on the way there, Kakashi mutters, which is very sizable if dot. But he's so close, Naruto insists, throwing a hand out wide in a vague but emphatic gesture. What's the point of all this scent tracking and us lagging behind Sasuke and Temari if we get right on top Gaara and just let him go? I'm not saying we do nothing, Kakashi counters, I am saying that 5 hours is a serious investment of time and energy, especially after what we've put in so far. It's a risk. With Gaara's life on the line and ours in the balance, we have to assess every risk carefully. Naruto's face screws up into a frown. What are you talking about? I could do another 5 hours no problem. Kakashi narrows his eye. Yes, I have no doubt you could. You're young and you have a tailed beast providing you with extra chakra and stamina. I'm not young anymore and don't have that advantage. We're in this together. We have to consider each other as much as Gaara when moving forward. Naruto scratches his head as he thinks out loud, I mean, we have soldier pills. Yes, we do, but if we take them that puts a hard 3-day time limit on this mission, Kakashi replies, if the mission runs over, whoever takes one passes out and leaves the rest of the work to Sasuke, Temari, and whatever backup Tsunade can scrounge up. I'll grant you that you can soften the impact if you take half a pill, but that also gives you half the energy. Naruto scowls at the dirt for a few more moments, then looks Kakashi in the eye. I don't know what the Akatsuki actually wanna do to Gaara or me or any of us Jinchuriki. But I don't know, there's a feeling in my gut like if we haven't gotten Gaara in 3 days, we're probably already too late. Kakashi can't help a hard sigh through his nose. There's really no counterpoint to that. At the end of the day, they're trying to rescue not only the Kazekage but the vessel of a beast more powerful than an army of shinobi fighting at their best. Taking Gaara back alive is almost less important than making sure the Akatsuki don't get away with the one-tail. Much as they can't afford to come into a fight exhausted and blind, the price they pay if they arrive even a moment too late is far steeper. Kakashi fishes around in his pack and retrieves 2 soldier pills. Best we take them whole, then. Naruto's eyes light up and he snatches the pill from Kakashi's hand, swallowing it dry. Kakashi can't help but cringe, not even going to think about washing it down. The grin Naruto cracks is bright but sharp, more like the ones he pulls in battle than with friends, like we've got time for that. Come on, old timer, take your pills and let's get going. Gaara's counting on us and we're not gonna let him down, believe it. Kakashi shakes his head, in for a penny, I suppose. Akino, take point, and guide us toward the scent. Akino nods and gets to his feet, shaking out his fur, whatever you say, boss. Kakashi snuffs out the fire, swallows his soldier pill dry, and leaps into the dark. Zara has no idea how long she's been staring out at the horizon, only that her eyes are starting to sting. She takes the binoculars down and rubs at her eyes. Of all the duties to be assigned in the aftermath of the Kazekige's kidnapping, she's certain keeping watch on top of the wall is the most humiliating. The most she's seen all day is the team that retrieved Kankuro schlepping back to the gates, defeated and carrying his unconscious body. The sun set an hour ago and she still hasn't been reassigned. Nobody's going to come over the horizon with good news anytime soon and they know it. No, she knows why she's here. She's not strong enough to clear the rubble blocking the gate, she doesn't have enough medical training to provide care to the wounded, and she doesn't have the mobility to go out and comb the desert. The only thing she's good for is staring at nothing. Zara heaves a sigh, letting her hair down from its tail. One upside of being on night watch, it's now cold enough that having her hair on her neck isn't unbearable. The downside is going to come in another hour or so, when it gets too cold and windy to bear being up this high. Hopefully by then someone will come to relieve her. Hopefully. With all the chaos in the village over their kidnapped leader and the only people who could take his place indisposed, she won't be surprised if they forget about her completely and she has to spend all night up here. Zara hoists the binoculars back up to her face and settles in for another 4 to 5 hours of seeing absolutely nothing. Those plans are ruined by a whirling gyre of wind and sand coming over the horizon at a breakneck pace. Zara nearly drops her binoculars, one hand keeping them on her eyes while the other reaches blindly around for her radio. She has it up to her mouth and is about to call in an unknown hostile when a bead of golden light flies straight up from the gyre. It races high into the sky before it explodes in a burst of yellow flame, almost like a firework. Zara fumbles with her radio for a few tense seconds before turning it on and shouting, "Jonin Baki, this is Genin Zara at the western wall reporting an unidentified flying object coming towards the village from the east." Visual is unclear, just a lot of sand and wind, but they fired off an airborne division flare signaling them as a friendly needing to make an urgent landing. They're moving they're moving really fast. What do I mean, please advise. There's a silence a second or two longer than she'd like before Baki's voice comes through in a garbled bark, fire off an all-clear answering flare, then get out of the way. If that is who I think it is, she's gonna land right on top of you once she gets that signal. Zara's eyes go wide and she yelps out a swear, scrambling to haul her radio, binoculars, and flares up as she sprints to one side. She drops the rest of her tools in a clattering heap as she grabs one of the flares and pulls fire chakra up from her belly, spitting a bead of flame onto its fuse. She throws it up into the air the moment before the fuse burns all the way down and the flare fires off into the sky. The explosion is deafening and the burst of green light near blinding. Zara blinks the spots out of her vision just in time to see the gyre of wind and sand is halfway across the desert and gaining. If her quick mental math is right, that thing is going to be on top of her in. The gyre suddenly picks up speed. Zara shrieks and drops low, covering her head as the sound of howling wind comes closer and closer. The wind whips at her hair and her skin, sharp and hard enough to cut. In one last wail, the blurry object slams directly into where Zara had been standing moments before. Wind spirals out from the impact zone and knocks her all the way onto her back. She throws her hands up to block her face as the wind kicks up enough sand to leave scrapes all over Zara's unarmored forearms. The wind dies down as quickly as it arrived. Zara slowly drops her arms and rolls to her knees to peek at the new arrivals. Sliding off the back of a giant weasel is none other than Temeri, the Kazekij's older sister and de facto commander of the airborne division. Her cheeks and nose are red from the wind's constant bite, her arms and legs shaking, her lips blue. Hopping off right behind her, looking far less worse for wear, is a boy Zara has never seen before. Even if she hadn't caught the headband tied around his leg, she'd recognize him as a Leaf Village ninja by his fair skin and bulky jacket. Neither are suited to life in the desert. The giant weasel disappears in a burst of white smoke and Temeri struggles to her feet, using her fan for support. She catches sight of Zara out of the corner of her eye and opens her mouth to speak, but snaps it shut and covers it as she leans forward, stifling a retching sound. The Leaf Village boy steadies her with an arm around her shoulders, keeping her upright as he mutters, "You don't need to push yourself anymore, let me take things from here." Before catching Zara's eye and his voice going sharp, "You have a radio, call whoever's in charge right now and tell them Chunin medic Sasuke Uchiha from the Hidden Leaf Village has arrived with Jonin Temeri. Tell them we're the advance support from the Leaf Village, and that Temeri is suffering from chakra exhaustion." Zara's jaw drops. She may never have seen this boy before, but she knows that name. The last Uchiha and apprentice to legendary Sunin Tsunade Senja. Being one of those things would make you merely interesting, being both at the same time makes you famous. She makes the call to Baki with sweaty palms and a shivering voice, eyes constantly darting back to Sasuke. Sasuke isn't returning the favor, preoccupied with crushing up some kind of tablet into Temeri's canteen and urging her to drink. She gulps it down like she's been lost in the desert for weeks. Baki's reply comes in quick and harsh, "Bring them to the hospital immediately." Zara chokes out a quick "Yes, sir," and turns off her radio, relaying to Sasuke, I am supposed to take you to the hospital." Sasuke has one of Temeri's arms over his shoulders and is making his way to the stairs. "No need, I know where it is." Zara's voice comes out in a squeak as she sprints to catch up. Wait, no, you can't. Technically we haven't verified your identity, so I can't let you go in without an escort. Sasuke glares over his shoulder at her, eyes flashing a bright red as he activates the Sharingan. Zara stumbles over her own feet, breath caught in her throat. He snarls through bared teeth, "Is that verification enough for you?" Zara's mouth might as well be glued shut. He rolls his eyes and turns away from her, taking the stairs two at a time. Sasuke homes in on the hospital like a hunting hawk and is at its doors in an instant. He kicks the door open hard enough that the hinges scream at the sudden impact, swinging violently in his wake. The hospital waiting room is a wide space with many branching hallways coming off it like spokes in a wheel. Seats for patients and desks for nurses and orderlies sit on the very edge of the room, leaving plenty of space for large amounts of patients to be rushed through or in highly dire situations the room itself to act as ICU, operating theater, and whatever else they need it to be. Plants with little need for sunlight or water sit in the furthest corners, basking in the bright, recessed, artificial lighting beaming down on them. Adobe walls keep it cool during the day, warm during the night. Baki is standing in the center of the waiting room, flanked by medics on either side. "Chunin Uchiha. You're early. Will there be more of you?" Sasuke nods. "We have others coming behind us on foot. They're tracking the Kazekij's scent, seeing if they can't catch the Akatsuki en route before they get here. I came ahead to assist in your relief efforts, under orders from Lady Tsunade to defer to you." Temeri takes another long gulp from her canteen and gasps, "Where's Kankuro?" Baki's jaw clenches, and he mutters through his teeth, "He's the reason you're both here. Follow me, I'll brief you." He leads them towards the stairs as he explains, "Kankuro managed to catch up to the Akatsuki and engage them, but obviously he didn't win. The agent he fought coated their weapons in some sort of poison. A potent one, too. He was able to manage a few sentences of a report, then started lapsing in and out of consciousness. This was 5 hours ago, and he's been completely unresponsive ever since. Let me guess," Temeri huffs, "Cho has refused to come out of retirement and help, like she always does, the ragged old bye." "Worse," Baki replies, "she's up there with him right now, has been for hours. She can't identify the poison. The only thing she knows for sure is that it's designed to make the target suffer a slow, painful death. On the plus side, we have a few more days to—" "No," Sasuke cuts in, voice hard and dark as obsidian, "we do not have a few more days. I know poisons like that, I've made poisons like that. They're designed to make you think you have time. If you let the poison ravage the body for long enough, even if you develop an antidote and save their life, the damage done to the tissue and organs in the meantime will still take the victim out of action, maybe temporarily, usually permanently, especially if it's doing anything to the brain. We don't have days. We have hours. Beiki doesn't respond with words. He instead responds by sending a burst of chakra to the soles of his feet and breaking into a run. Sasuke is quick on his heels, keeping up easily despite Temeri's weight on his shoulder. They climb all the way to the top floor, Sasuke stopping only when they're right outside the door to one of the operating theaters to ease off Temeri. Do you think you can stand on your own? Temeri sprints out of his grasp and through the door, calling her brother's name like it's being torn out of her throat. Sasuke and Beiki quickly follow, but Beiki has to pause once he's through. He's seen it so many times since Kankuro's return, but the sight of him like this never fails to make his blood run cold. Seeing Kankuro without his face paint and puppeteer garb is like seeing him naked. With his hair exposed and his features on full display, the resemblance between him and the fourth Kaze cage makes Beiki's stomach roll. His skin is pale and clammy, the sheen of sweat glistening almost yellow in the fluorescent light. His eyes are mostly closed. Like this he can see them glazed over, twitching in their sockets, moving without seeing. Beiki is used to hearing Kankuro's voice shouting orders, drawling through jokes he knows are horrible, and chuffing rough but sincere praise to his siblings. It's just not made for these weak, pained groans and hoarse, wheezing breaths. Temeri shoves her way past the medics standing vigil around Kankuro and crashes to her knees at his bedside. She takes his hand in hers, squeezing it with white knuckles. Beiki can't see her face from this angle, but he doesn't need to, not when he can hear Temeri whispering, "Hey, Kankuro, it's me. It's Tem. I'm here now. I brought help, I promise you're gonna be okay and we're gonna get Gaara back, I promise. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner, but I'm here now, I'm here." Kankuro's fingers twitch in Temeri's grip. Beiki's throat tightens and he forces his gaze over to Sasuke. Sasuke elbows his way through the medics and up to Kankuro's side, Sharingan flaring to life. His jacket is off and around his waist in seconds, a thin membrane of chakra coating his hands like latex gloves as he starts poking and prodding at Kankuro's body. He opens one of Kankuro's eyes all the way and fishes a tiny flashlight out of one of his jacket pockets, shining it on his eye for a few moments before pocketing it again and forcibly opening his mouth, probing around inside with his fingers. Well, you can't say he isn't being thorough. After a few more moments of examination he holds one hand out to the medics and snaps, "Chart. Now." The medics exchange astonished glances before the one nearest to Sasuke blinks rapidly, stammering, "I who?" There's a clatter nearby and an elderly voice snaps, "Just who do you think you are, boy?" Sasuke is the only person whose head doesn't whip toward the new commotion. Cho is fuming at her workstation, scrolls, vials, various and sundry herbs all forgotten in favor of glaring poisoned daggers at Sasuke. Ebizo is a foot behind Cho and similarly interested in Sasuke, peering curiously at him from beneath his long eyebrows. Sasuke just snaps his fingers and repeats with a blood-red glare over one shoulder, "Chart. Now. I won't ask a third time." The youngest of the medics, a girl with the deep brown skin of the southeast border tribes, fumbles the chart directly into Sasuke's waiting hand. He mutters a nearly inaudible thanks before flipping through the pages at rapid speed, eyes moving too fast to track. Beiki glances back to Cho. She grinds her teeth and looks Sasuke up and down several times before her gaze gets stuck on the Uchiha crest on the back of his jacket. Beiki preemptively drags his hand down his face. This will not end well. "What is the world coming to?" Cho spits, fixing Beiki with a look that could strip the paint from a wall, "that you're putting one of our own people's life in the hands of not only a leaf ninja, but an Uchiha." Beiki sighs through a grimace, "Lady Cho, Sasuke is perfectly qualified." "Bah," Cho scoffs, "Uchiha are only qualified to do one thing, destroy." Now, that's not fair," Ebizo chides, "don't you remember Sayano Uchiha, from the war? Brilliant surgeon, that one, had an encyclopedic knowledge of anatomy." Cho fires back before he's even finished, "And why do we know that?" Because she'd use it to take our men apart on the interrogation table before taking their minds apart with her sherry non. And we could never put them back together again. A person who can do that, a clan who can do that to people without even thinking. Suzuki barks just above Cho's ranting. This is a heavy metal-based toxin meant to tear up muscle tissue. Its ultimate aim is to weaken the cardiac muscle until the heart collapses and stops functioning. In the meantime, it poses a significant risk to the rest of his body. If you want Kankuro to come out of this not only alive but still able to walk, I'm going to need you to do as I say and do it fast. The medics immediately snap to attention. Why yes, sir. Cho, of course, crosses the distance and grabs Suzuki's shoulder as she shouts over them, "How dare you!" Suzuki whirls on his heel to face Cho. "How dare I what? How dare I act quickly and decisively? How dare I not mince words when there's a life on the line? How dare I act like a goddamn adult? Take your pick, I don't care. I don't have time for your petty tribalist bitching and neither does Kankuro. Either get out of my way or I will make you get out of it." Cho's jaw clenches and her shoulders tense, but Ebizo quickly comes up behind her. "Listen to the boy, Cho. You're forgetting yourself." Suzuki doesn't watch the tension leak from Cho like air from a balloon as Ebizo leads her away, turning back to his patient without giving her a second glance. Beiki follows her with his eye, watches her shuffle out into the hallway and settle on the bench across from the door. Cho keeps her eyes narrow and trained on Suzuki, following him like a fox tracking a lizard across the dunes. Beiki takes his cue from her, turning his attention back to Suzuki. "As I was saying, I'm going to need water and basins. Lots of them." "Double time," Suzuki snaps, and the medics hastily comply. In the brief moment that they're gone, Tamari angles a smirk up at Suzuki and rasps, "Who taught you your bedside manner, Doc?" Suzuki replies, "Women who forced their way to the top of this field 35 years ago and invented modern medical ninjutsu as we know it." Tamari coughs out a chuckle. "I see. That explains it." From the corner of his ear, Beiki catches Cho muttering, "It can't be. That old slug queen wouldn't take an Uchiha as her apprentice. There's no way." Ebizo's affable murmur brings a smirk to Beiki's face. "Times change, Cho. Perhaps Tsunade changed with them." In the space of a few more breaths, the medics return with several basins and gallon-sized canisters of water. Suzuki guides them through setting out one of the basins and filling it with water, placing the rest on standby, then directs them all to surround the bed on either side. He looks to Tamari and Beiki. "If you can, I'm gonna need you to help hold him down. He's not gonna like this part." A jolt of panic goes down Beiki's spine, but he goes and positions himself down by Kankuro's legs without a word. Tamari pulls herself to her feet and posts up at his shoulders. Suzuki dips a hand in the basin and his sherry-non slowly start to spin. When he takes his hand out, he brings the water with it. It glows from within with blue-green chakra, casting strange shadows on the walls of the operating theater. With a deep breath, Suzuki presses the water onto Kankuro's chest. Then into his chest. Kankuro's eyes shoot open wide. His voice comes blasting out in a raw and tattered scream, thrashing against and away from Suzuki's ministrations. Tamari, Beiki, and the medics all force him down, using all their strength to keep him still. Suzuki grits his teeth, Tomo spinning faster and faster as he moves more and more of the chakra-saturated water into Kankuro's body through his pores. Suzuki brings his other hand over to the opposite side of Kankuro's chest and lays it flat over his heart. He shuts his eyes, takes a deep breath, and pulls the water back out with that hand. Beiki's eye goes wide. The water comes out the other side speckled with blood and peppered with larger splotches of a dark purple liquid, twisting around in the fluid like wriggling insects. "Is that the poison?" Tamari gasps, eyes darting between the water and Kankuro's face, contorted in pain. "If it isn't, I have some questions about your brother's diet," Suzuki mutters, dropping the water into the basin from whence it came. "Another one." The process is long, drawn out, and painful for everyone involved. Beiki's arms creak with the effort of pinning Kankuro down, and his screams never abate. He's sure he'll be hearing them when he goes to sleep tonight. While Suzuki does the heavy lifting, he instructs two of the medics to break off and separate the poison from the water as best they can. They go through more water than Beiki can quantify at a glance as Suzuki works his way down Kankuro's body, forcing the poison out of his major organs and muscle groups. He works with the kind of methodical precision only gained through practice. The Sharingan is helping, certainly, but rote imitation and sharper sight can only get you so far. Sasuke's making up the difference with the kind of effort that makes sweat roll down your face like raindrops. It's easily 2 hours before Sasuke drops the last of the water in the very last basin, leans back, and sighs, "Okay, now I've bought us some time." The medics break out into big smiles and clap Sasuke on the back as they let out little triumphant cheers. The still Chakra, exhausted to Mary, staggers away, back hitting the wall, and slumps down to the floor with a massive exhale. Baki pats Kankuro's shin and smiles up at his face. They may not be out of the woods yet, but they're on their way. Now comes the slightly less hard part, Sasuke continues, straightening up and dusting off his hands. "I'm gonna need a list of the medicinal herbs you have in the village. In the meantime, we should change his bandages, hook him up to an 4 drip, and set aside samples of the poison." The medics hop back to work, and from the edge of his vision Baki can see Cho slowly making her way back into the room. Her eyes are still trained on Sasuke, her expression tight and pensive. Sasuke doesn't seem to be paying her any mind. Not until she speaks up, "Are you really that old slug Queen Tsunade's student, boy?" Sasuke doesn't bother turning his Sharingan off as he meets her gaze with a steady glare. "I am. She sent me here personally. And my name is Sasuke Uchiha. Call me boy again and we will have a problem." Cho arches a brow. "We aren't having one now." Sasuke bares his teeth in a primate grin, pure challenge with none of the mirth. "You haven't seen anything yet." Jungsimji is an old city, one of the oldest in the east. She remembers when the land of sound was the land of rice paddies. She remembers when the land of rice paddies was Imperial Province Sweden. She remembers when the Imperial Province Sweden was the Kingdom of Nan, and the people of Nan dragged stone all the way from the Kingdom of Suinong to build a fortress to defend themselves against the armies of the first emperor. They named her for what she was, the center of their world, the heart of their kingdom, the most pivotal and important point in the whole country. And when the emperor's armies arrived she had burned down to the stone. Kings were warriors then, and the king had fought until his last breath in the streets of his capital to defend his home, his people, and his very way of life. 700 years later, Jungsimji is once again burning. And her daimyo is hiding in a wardrobe. Daimyo Kazuyuki Sato has no idea when the chaos started, precisely, only when it reached the ears of his guard. Sato had been in the middle of breakfast when his personal bodyguard, a shinobi hand-selected by Orochimaru who called herself Mokin, had been called aside by one of the palace guards. She was a severe woman, loath to move her face even to blink, but whatever the guard had whispered to her had made her eyebrows leap halfway up her forehead. She had whirled on her heel and hauled him to his feet, dragging him away. "The city is under siege, my lord. Come. We must move to a more secure part of the palace." All he had thought to splutter with a mouth still half full of food was, "Is the whole palace not secure?" Mokin's mouth had simply twitched, distorting one of her scars. "Of course it is, my lord." At first, he was simply restricted to the Hanmaru. But after another guard, this one with fear in his eyes and sweat on his brow, whispered something to Mokin, she restricted him to the Tenshukaku. Then to the upper 2 floors of the Tenshukaku. Then to the top floor. Then to his quarters. And finally, she had thrown him physically into his wardrobe. The last thing he saw before she shut the door and barred it were Mokin's flinty eyes and her tense jaw as she hissed, "Do not try to leave this wardrobe. If you want to live, stay quiet and still as a corpse." And here he has sat, following her instructions, for what feels like hours. Sato occupies his nervous hands by rubbing one of the silk robes he's sandwiched between, his mind racing. For his guard to be this nervous yet this silent about why, it can only be the peasants. And for it to be the peasants, something must have gone horribly wrong on Orochimaru's end. That was his part of the bargain. He keeps the peasants in line, keeps the flow of grain and revenue going steadily up so it can trickle down, and Sato lets him run the hidden sound village however he pleases. It's been working for over a decade. Orochimaru may be an unsettling creature of a man, but he gets results. It's thanks to him Sato has been living in comfort for this long. It's thanks to him that Sato is sitting where his simple cousin sat all those years ago, enjoying the privileges his cousin had endured. What could have possibly happened to a legendary Sunin to make him shirk his duties like this? Sato forces himself to breathe easy. Orochimaru gave him his very best men to defend the palace, defend him, defend his wife and heirs. He will be fine. The peasants may be numerous, but they're nothing compared to ninja, they don't have the raw power. There's a muffled boom in the distance and the sound of crumbling rock. If that was one of the palace's cannons going off, there would be no rock for them to hit, unless they're breaking their own walls now. Sato's breathing spikes and he clutches at the silk robes around him like a security blanket. Where did the peasants get gunpowder? Never mind the powder, where did they get cannons? Orochimaru was supposed to enforce the law, keep gunpowder out of the hands of peasants, because gunpowder is all it takes to turn a rabble into a militia and... No, they're untrained, unskilled, uneducated. They're simple people. They don't have formations, battle plans, strategies, anything you need to take a fortress. They're like the tide, they roll and crash upon the cliffs and they break. It takes eons for waves to erode a cliffside. These people don't have eons. They have days, at best. He can outlast them. His guards can outlast them. Easily. He just needs to follow Mokin's instructions. Stay still and quiet as a corpse if he wants to live, don't try to leave, and... The wardrobe doors splinter open. A beast with an orange mane, golden eyes, and skin splotched with grey leers over him, his heaving breath steaming in the cold night air. With one massive claw, he grabs Sato by the scruff and throws him into the center of his bedchamber. The first thing he sees is Mokin's corpse, blood from 3 massive gashes across her chest and a hole in her forehead staining his northern wind country rug, her face frozen in a scream. His clock, built by artisans in the capital of the Land of Fire, lies in pieces at her side. Its gilt hands are forever stopped at 10 o'clock. The night glows red-hot as firelight filters through the shoji. Sato can hear the sounds of clashing blades, firing artillery, and dying gasps, nowhere near as distant as he'd like. The orange-haired, man-shaped beast calls over his shoulder, "The cowards in here." The heavy oak doors creak open and 2 figures step through, a woman and a slip of a girl. The woman has cropped brown hair, a scar on her temple, and her plain jogiri and baji are stained with blood. In one hand she totes a rifle, while the other is hidden behind her back. Sato tries to get a look at the girl, but all he catches is pink hair before she seems to dissolve into the harsh shadows cast by the fire outside. The woman takes 3 steps into the room before bringing her other hand out from behind her back and tossing something dark and round towards him. The object hits the ground, bounces, and rolls to a stop a foot away from Sato's face. He's face to face with the severed head of Orochimaru. The woman's lip lifts in a sneer, "We'll be accepting your surrender now, Daimyo Sato." Check the description for the links to the author.